was almost overthrew in 1905.
Russia,
And then it was overthrown
Russia
in
is a
1917.
1,000-year-old country, man. Russia is a
I know. And
1,000-year-old country.
guess what? The Russian Empire.
You're focusing on the last 20
you're
years.
talking about the Russian civilization, the Russian Empire, and the Westernization that began with Peter the Great was a turn away from Russian greatness. You want to know what Stalinism is? Stalinism is a return to the Tsardom of Muscovy. Stalinism is a return of Ivan the Terrible politics. They are the exact same kind of figure in history. During the Ivan's time, there were boyars and these elites who were against the people and stifling the growth of the people. Ivan, as a representative of the peasantry, cut them out. He took their land away. He created the Oprishchina and basically nationalized the land and completely outmoded the aristocracy. He spread local democracies across Russia through his charters. And he started a revolution in the forces of production that was ultimately not completely successful, but
Then why the country fell in the 1970s?
What did you say?
Then why did the Russian economy stop growing in the 1970s?
The 1970s? I'm talking about Ivan the Terrible. What are you talking about?
If communism was so great,
Why? Okay, I'll tell you.
why did the Russian economy stop growing in the 1970s?
I'll tell you why. It's because Russian communism never became as advanced as Chinese communism. That's why there was actually a split. I don't know if you know this, but there's a split in the communist world after the death of Stalin with the rise of Khrushchev. There was a split between China and Russia. And while this split was geopolitical, there also was a split ideologically in terms of what direction they were going in terms of ideology, right? So with Russia, the communists in Russia never adapted to the neoliberal era, and they were never able to build a consumer economy. They were never able to use data, for example, in a more advanced form of state planning.
So you are telling me that essentially the communism will always fail?
No, I'm telling you that communism failed in Russia because it did not evolve to the same level of advancement as it did in China.
Because communism in Russia stayed to the communist principles.
No, there are no communist principles. There are no such thing as communist principles. Communism is a scientific. Here's what communism is. Communism is when a communist party arises and, based upon the science of Marxism, leads the revolution in the forces of production. Now, Stalin did this during his time, right? But that wasn't the end of socialism or the end of the revolution in the forces of production. Khrushchev was not able to do something similar. In China, the Communist Party never stopped leading these revolutions in the forces of production. That's the difference. I'm saying that in Russia, communism never adapted to the neoliberal era. In China, it did. In other words, this was not the failure of communism in general. It was the failure of Russian communism to adapt to these the changes in the forces of production that other communists in other places have been able to adapt to.
Okay, so they had to embrace capitalism to succeed?
No. China never embraced.
Or at least a state capitalism to succeed. Capitalism to be successful.
China never adopted capitalism. Okay, here's the thing. I'll explain why there's a confusion. When you think of capitalism, you just think of the market. There's private entities, etc., and so on. But my thesis is that this kind of capitalism stopped existing in the late 1800s and the early 19th century. And generally, economies stopped being really motivated by private profit and became instead organized by forms of state planning. Now, in China, and also in America, not just in China, but also in America, eventually this state planning, this kind of explicit direct state planning gave way to a decentralized state planning. And so there was a decentralization in China where not everything was now directly organized by the state, but instead there was allowed to be a market, but the market was indirectly organized by the state according to Chinese state policies and 5-year plans. Like they have 5-year plans in China where they decide, okay, we want this to happen, we want that to happen, we want this to happen. And these plans don't involve them getting rid of the market. It involves them directing the market. So what I'm trying to say, is that socialism itself, the stage of socialism that the USSR was in was a more primitive, less advanced state. A higher and more advanced form of socialism actually involves the market. It actually involves the indirect planning of the market to these plans and so on. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, it's fascism.
No, it's not fascism.
It's a market economy run by the state with the means of property being privately held by people who work for the government.
Here's the thing, actually, the means of property in China, like the most fundamental means of production in China, land, is not owned privately. It's owned, formally speaking, by the state. It's just that people have the ability to make use of this land, but they have to, but they can't just use it however they want to. So, for example, there's a business that is acting in a way that the Communist Party thinks is going against the general interest of the people. They can crack down on it or shut it down. Same with billionaires, et cetera, and so on. Now, the essential distinction between fascism and Chinese socialism is that fascism, the essence of fascism, the economic essence of fascism, was militarism. The only reason why the fascists were able to gain popularity and power is because they promised the German people foreign lands, right? And so instead of basing their economic revolution on land reform, they based it on the idea that they could capture foreign lands. And this new military machine that was created to do this was the economic basis for the fascist economy. In China, the basis for the economy is not the military. The basis of the economy is their industrial sector. And also, instead of promising the people foreign lands, they had land reforms, collectivization, et cetera, and so on.
Also with this, hold on, I'm making it more quick. So with the land reform, what you're doing is you're giving rise to conditions which can build new wealth. You're essentially abolishing the conditions which gave rise to these crazy satanic evil monopolies that crush out everybody. You're actually rebuilding a new basis for wealth. That's what China has done quite successfully. Even the Soviet Union did it quite successfully.
If the biggest means of production is land, which is the most valuable and the one you cannot replace, and that means of production it's government owned, then by that definition, the Chinese society will never be as rich as the West.
But yeah, that's the point, though. So I think now you understand that China is socialist. But the thing that I think you're not making peace with, wait a second, the thing you're not making peace with is that China actually is being more successful than the West economically. It's growing far faster, and I mean it's growing far.
Yes, because it was coming farther behind.
Yeah, you can say that. Yeah, but now
every nation that's farther behind grows faster.
But now it's not like further behind. Now it's the second biggest economy in the world, and it's still growing far faster.
And their growth has stalled dramatically.
That's actually not true. They grew 4.9% in the first quarter of this year. I mean, that's less than
a quarter, not a year. A quarter. That's not the same, dude.
Yeah, but it's a part of a year. It's like, okay, are you stupid? Like literally last year, China grew like 4.9 or like 5% America, in the first quarter of this year decreased by like 1.6%. China's going by like 4.9% in the first quarter of this year.
Dude, economics 101, a quarter is not a year. A quarter can be positive and the one could be negative.
The point is that the direction that the economy is going toward in this year, at the beginning of this year, is far better than the direction that the American economy is going towards. The idea that China just grew fast because it was smaller is stupid. If that's the case, why is it that China grew far faster than India? Why is it that China has grown faster than all these other third world countries? Why wasn't it some other third world country that ended up being America's biggest competitor? Are you stupid? Are you blind? This is literally right in front of your face. Their growth, you said their growth is stalled, but it's still like fucking 5%. Like per year. That's not a stalled growth. That's the kind of economic growth that is not seen in any other big economy in the world. They are literally the fastest big economy in the entire world, and they're not stopping anytime soon. America, in America, by the way, America's financial basis, which is the U.S. dollar and the petrodollar, that's dying. I mean, people are threatening to sell oil to Russia without using dollars. Do you know what that means? It means that the power of the dollar is dying. The American economy and American finance has been, since the end of the gold standard, based upon the power of the dollar. If the dollar dies, that's the end of the American empire. America doesn't even have industry. America doesn't even have industry anymore. We have our industry used to be one of our most fundamental, biggest parts of our economy. Now we don't have it. It's been.
It ended up in China, building up China.
That's my point.
So essentially, it can come back.
Maybe. But
if China becomes an ideological enemy of America, what do you think will happen to those factories?
It's already America's biggest ideological enemy. They're literally run by a communist party.
Can I add something as a Chinese, from the Chinese perspective?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah. Socialism is really making China very successful. The main reason is the Chinese system directs the funds to benefit the majority of the people. They build roads, bridges to nowhere. It's not. They do not do that to make a profit. It's just to bring more and more poor people into the system. They always say prosperity together. In the media, you always hear serve the people, serve the majority of the people. In the West, people would think that's a funny idea. But in China, from kids all the way to the government officials, it's a common norm. It's really accepted as it's the way it's supposed to be. It's a myth that capitalism would lead to prosperity. Before China opened up, China was poor not because of the system. That was because of the embargo, the sanctions from America and later on from USSR. So there's no direct, it's not a causation that socialism made China poor. That's just not true. At that time, the international environment was just very hostile, and China just very liberated itself from the imperial West. So the result of the development now you see in China benefited from the foundation that Mao laid. Redistribution of the land, educate the masses. That's why you have the quality of labor, right? So that's why the system now can even benefit more from the population. And in China, serve the people is the slogan of the government officials. And there's absolute accountability, the COVID situation or corruption. And there's absolutely accountability. And in the U.S., in the Western countries, the corruption is outrageous. Legalized corruption. There's no accountability. People can protest. You go to the street. Your sons and daughters are still being sent to wars, and nothing you can do. So I just from the Chinese perspective, there's lots of propaganda, misunderstanding about the Chinese system. But I think sooner or later, because the system benefits the majority of the people, it will keep growing and grow faster and develop more than other system. I think that's the major threat to the imperialists, because the poor country, the African countries, South America countries, they see the alternative. And the equality, not only Chinese talk about equality, not within China, but internationally, equal opportunity, right? The poor countries, why can't they develop a viable economy with their rich resources? Why do they have to be explored? And that should change. African countries, all the colored people should have a chance to benefit, to have a good economy, benefit from their resources. So, that's what I want to say.
Thanks for your perspective. Thanks for your perspective on that. I think, speaking of the relationship of African countries to China, that's why I think the Belt and Road Initiative is really starting something really big, because it's building up these trade networks across the world, especially in Africa and in Asia, and in like the Middle East. And also it's building up the infrastructure throughout Africa. And as I was saying earlier, infrastructure is the basis for industrialism. And so I think that this process of the building up of infrastructure in Africa will lead long term to a lot of prosperity and a lot of growth, and also a new international model of win-win cooperation versus America's zero-sum game way of approaching things.
And what can happen if China reaches the American level?
You said what's going to happen if China reaches the American level?
What happens when China becomes the empire?
China's here. Yeah, see, that's what I'm getting at exactly. Is that right now the way the world works is that there's American unipolarity. There's an American empire, and it's based in these globalist financial institutions. Now, the world that's being built by the overthrow of the American empire, I don't think it will have a singular empire. It will be multipolar. There's going to be multiple big players. As you would say, there will be Russia, there'll be China. I think there'll be some kind of new European polity. I think America will still, at some point, again, return to being a big player. And the way that trade and finance, et cetera, works, I think will no longer be based upon this kind of American view where not only are you going to trade with a country, but you're also going to determine that country's sovereignty and its politics and interfere with its politics. I think it's going to be based more so upon the Chinese model of foreign relations, where they're very non-interventionist. They don't get their hands in the political beliefs and the political systems of other people, but just try to forge win-win trade agreements. I think that's going to be the way the world is looking in the future.
There could be multiple empires. I don't think so, but there could be. But Russia won't be one of them. Russia's going to be just a resource colony of China. That's the thing.
No, it's not. You spoke of the great Russian history, but if you actually believe that Russia is a great civilization, you would not be saying this. Russia is a great civilization. It has a very long history, and for most of its history, it's always been a major civilization, a major empire. Russia's not just going to be a slave of China. Russia is a partner of China because they share a common interest, which is the overthrow of these globalist financial institutions, which are trying to suffocate both countries.
Russia is 12 times poorer and 10 times smaller. It'll happen, man. And the government is going down.
Actually, no. Here's the thing. Here's the reason why it won't happen. China. I don't think China wants the countries it's partnered with to have to be poor. Because think about it like this: if Russia is so poor, how are they going to buy Chinese products? Right?
I didn't say they were going to be poor.
Well, okay.
I said they're not going to be an empire. That's what I said.
That they're going to be the slave of China specifically. So I think that implies
they're going to be essentially a Chinese-owned market.
No, that's not true at all. That's not true at all, because Russia brings a lot to the table itself. I mean, Russia is one of the biggest exporters of oil. Yeah, and and Russia has the most nukes. I think the most nukes in the world. Russia's never just going to be like a slave to another country again. Maybe during this period between after the fall of the USSR with Yeltsin, Russia was under the control of these imperialists and so on. I don't think Russia will ever be under the control of a foreign country ever again in its history. I don't think so.
Unless they go under
Western Russia, no, but Eastern Russia might.
What do you say?
I think that's awfully hopeful.
It's not hope. It's not hope. It's not hopeful. It's absolutely not hopeful at all. It's just realistic. The idea that China is just going to rule the entire world, it's just not realistic. You guys don't understand.
No, it's going to be a multipolar world. I agree with Henry.
I'm not a big fan of any empires, but China is definitely one of those that's going to be very big. I don't support the Belt and Road Initiative and any of the imperialism.
That's not imperialism. It's not imperialism. And I can prove that to you methodically. No. If it's imperialism, why is it that they forgive why is it that they forgive the debt of pretty much every country that's not able to actually pay off their loans? Why is it that they forgive their debt partially or completely in almost every case? Is that imperialist? I don't think it is.
Isn't China trying to take the economic zones of every country in Southeastern Asia? That's imperialism.
No, it's not imperialism. They're not trying to control the what are you even talking about? That's not imperialism at all. What China does is this.
The exclusive economic zone.
DJ.
The exclusive economic zone. That's what I'm talking about.
DJ, do they have bases in these other countries like America does though?
Bases is not military bases is not.
No, they don't got bases over there.
Listen. This is what China's.
They are actually building bases in the Spratly Islands.
Yeah,
though.
China has some bases in some countries, but primarily speaking, they don't have like a lot of military bases all over the world. Well, in the case of America, we have military bases literally all over the world. That's just not the case with China. Secondly, in terms of economic and finance,
For now.
They have a non-interventionist policy. The reason why China's been able to be so successful is precisely because they're not doing the same thing as America. You think that America only started having military bases in other countries after it became powerful? No, that was the part of its rise to power. The way that China's rising to power is fundamentally different than the way that America rose to power. The Chinese rise to power is not based in interventionism. It's not based in interfering in the sovereign politics of other countries, because that does not benefit China whatsoever. China's rise to power, when it comes to their trade and their international relations, is based upon win-win trade deals. What they'll do is they'll offer loans to other countries, or they'll offer to build up infrastructure in other countries. These countries will take that loan. Sometimes they'll be able to pay it back. Sometimes they won't. In the great majority of the cases, when they're not able to pay it back, China either completely forgives the debt or partially forgives the debt, and they work from there. They forge deals that are beneficial for both countries and are almost always willing to renegotiate the terms of their loans if there's problems paying it back. This has absolutely nothing in common with imperialism whatsoever. I mean, the idea that China's imperialist is just stupid. It's just really, really stupid. China in no way compares to America's military and political intervention across the world, nor does their financial investments compare in any way to the way in which the IMF will give countries money, but dictate the terms in which those countries can plan their economies. The IMF has literally systematically planned foreign economies such that their agriculture will be always dependent upon America. China's never done anything like that. The difference is that with these IMF loans and World Bank loans, is that they come along with these failed developmental models that these countries are forced into, and are just implicit ways for America to benefit, even though they pretend to be global institutions. Now, in China does not pretend to be a global institution. China is acting as for a Chinese interest, right? They're not hiding behind a global institution. That itself is already different. Secondly, with these loans and so on, they're not dictating the way the general politics of the country goes, nor are they literally planning and restructuring the entire economy of the country, the sovereign terms of the other country. I mean, this is not at all in any way comparable. As far as multipolarity goes, I think objectively it's a thing. China is not the only rising polarity in the world. Financially speaking, it may be the only one that exists today. But there's also going to be a Russian polarity. I think there's also going to be a European polarity. There's going to be an American polarity. There may even be like an Indian polarity or something along those lines. And I think there will be probably multiple African polarities. So this idea that it's just going to be China ruling the world, I mean, that's just not true. That's not realistic. It has no basis at all in reality.
I think just to say China will be
You can go ahead.
Oh,
So
no,
to
my
say-
bad.
Sorry. Okay. I think it's just a pure projection from some people say China will be a imperialist country. It's just pure projection. It's not in China's genes. Chinese people, actually, the Chinese peoples, actually, we have different ethnicities inside China. The reason is over the thousands of years, people around China at the beginning, China was smaller than now, right? So over the years, throughout the history, different groups integrated, kind of like now, integrated into commerce.
Kelly, can I ask you a question? You're Chinese, right?
Yes.
Okay, you're saying the only reason why China hasn't risen economically is because of sanctions? That doesn't make any sense.
Did I say that?
You did say that.
No, she said
what I'm
that.
gonna ask
No,
you
wait a second. She spoke specifically in the context of China under Mao, while it was sanctioned by the U.S. and sanctioned by later on by Russia, because there was a Sino-Soviet split. And in that context, yeah, that is a really big part of the reason why China wasn't growing. Secondly, wait a second. Secondly, I think what you don't understand is that the Deng Xiaoping reform and opening up period, it was not it was not a return to capitalism. It was a further extrapolation of Chinese socialism. What even made that possible in the first place was, one, the rapid industrialization under Mao. Two, some of the agricultural advancements during the Cultural Revolution, and three, on a political level, I think the Cultural Revolution, while it's a very it's a very touchy subject in China, I think the Cultural Revolution, which basically threw off the Soviet aligned elites, Soviet aligned party bureaucracy, it was against those kinds of people, allowed for China to have its own unique socialist experience, as opposed to being a mere copycat of Soviet-style socialism. So this is what opened up the very space for someone like Deng Xiaoping to exist in the first place and to take the kind of direction that he took.
What did Deng Xiaoping mean when he said, "I don't care if it's a black cat or white cat, as long as it catches mice"? What do you mean by that?
The point of that is that it does not matter how the goal is what matters.
He's talking about economics, dude.
Yeah, well, that's my point. That's what I'm trying to say. Like, socialism is not a dogma. Socialism is not one discrete kind of economic system. Like that's in no way in contradiction with what I'm saying at all. Like the wisdom of this is that instead of following dogmas, just for the sake of the legitimacy of these dogmas themselves, it's actually the practical result of your practice that matters. And this is a part of Marxism. No, wait a second. This is the part of Marxism.
Communism, then.
Yeah, but that's the thing. That's the thing. Yeah, but that's the thing. Communism is not a dogma. That's the whole point of Marxism and of even Chinese Marxism specifically, which is that communism, as opposed to being a dogma, Marxism, as opposed to being a dogma, is a scientific way in which we can have an insight into the economy, into political economy, and based upon these theoretical achievements, we can commit to some form of practice, some kind of direction. From that practice, from its failures and from its failures and successes, we can learn from it. We can re-theorize, think more, practice again, and it becomes a cycle where communism is a self-revolutionizing kind of thing. Like, communism is not a dogma. It's always revolutionizing itself and becoming more advanced.
About communism as you have. It sounds like you've read a lot of books about it, but what I'd like to know is, because you know something about it more than I do, can you own private property under communism?
Yeah, people can own private property under communism. Yes.
Can you own your own manufacturing company or business under communism?
Yes.
To what extent, though?
So here's what I would say. So as I was saying earlier, while people are able to use the land and so on and so forth, the land is, in the final instance, state-owned, right? And also businesses and so on, they can't just do whatever they want. So while you would be allowed to have your own company, your own business and so on, there would be certain policies, certain laws and standards that you have to abide by. And the purpose of these laws and policies would be to direct the market towards achieving social ends. Or as Skyline said earlier, the ultimate goal is to benefit the majority of the people. So the way that Chinese state planning works is that it doesn't get rid of privately owned businesses. It just creates policies and guidelines that directs the profits and the fruits of these businesses towards the benefit of the Chinese people. Does that make sense?
It makes sense, but I'm not sure in practice. I want to ask Kelly. Kelly, are you in China right now?
No, I cannot go back right now because COVID.
Okay, well, can I ask you a question? Because I learned. That's why I ask questions.
Yeah.
Are you aware of Tiananmen Square in your country? What
Yes.
the Chinese government did? Do you know they killed a lot of people?
No, that's
because of their
not
beliefs?
true. Okay.
It's not true?
No,
So what
it's
I saw
not
on
true.
TV was a lie?
Yes,
Not to believe
the
Yes, it's a
Western-
lie. It is a
the
lie.
you have to understand that many Chinese, they were not so patriotic before we go to other country, go to the West, before we were exposed to the Western media day in and day out. That's what turned us very patriotic, because what you hear outside China is just the 80,
No, we saw
85%
videos of
little
them shooting
lies.
people in the streets there, Kelly.
Okay.
One second, I didn't mean to mute everyone, but I just want to respond here. So a lot of what you will see about Tiananmen Square actually is a lie. Like, for example, the famous Tank Man picture. That guy did not get run over by a tank. I mean, that was a lie. And another thing is that these protests, the Tiananmen Square protests, were becoming very, very violent, very chaotic. I mean, even in America, we've had protests that have gotten out of control, right? I mean, like, these are not just like, just good old people protesting. These people were doing a lot of really violent and destructive things.
They were making Molotovs and throwing them at buildings and throwing it at people.
So, like, it's just like how in your own country, if protesters were like throwing bombs and shooting, killing people, et cetera, and so on, you'd probably want the police to intervene. So I think you have to apply the same standard when you look at how other countries handle their protests. No, I'm going to let Skyline and Peace talk. Continue.
Yeah, so quick comment about the Tiananmen Square. So lots of those leaders, the student leaders, they were on walkie-talkie with the American embassy in Beijing. There was a coordinated effort. It was a color revolution. At the end, the government had to do something. But definitely, they would burn the soldiers' hand on the bridge. People in the West never know about that. People commemorate June 4th. How about those soldiers burned alive? Those people turned very violent, and the student leaders escaped very fast. One of the famous lady, I think she was one of only prominent student leader at the time. She was crying, interviewed by a Western media, saying, "These people do not deserve my sacrifice. I want blood." That's what she was saying. And then she turned to be a Christian. I don't know. That was just, maybe she's asking for God to forgive. But that's kind of mentality. And those people definitely did not have the China's interest in their mind. And the lies in the
Kelly,
West.
I went to your country in 2017. I went to Tiananmen Square and I was talking to people. They didn't even know. They go, "What are you talking about? There's so much propaganda there. The people in your own country don't even know what happened."
No, because the Chinese government, let me give you another example. The Uyghur situation, right? There was a massacre. The people, Uyghurs, they were, what's that word? They turned very extreme. There's blood flowing down the street. Those people took out knives. They hacked down Uyghurs, Han people. But we Chinese people didn't know about that too much later, because the government did not want to turn people against each other. It just they want the situation to calm down, to control. They don't want people to be against each other, to escalate the violence. That's the Chinese government's particular way to handle that kind of situation. They do not put that in media to sensationalize the news. That's not the Chinese way. I don't know. I cannot. Well, sometimes I don't think it does not work to the Chinese government's advantage, but that's how they control the media, the news. And until much later we learn about the brutality, it's really horrifying. And most people, Chinese people, would be very mad. And that does not benefit China, right? Anyway, so there was a question for me earlier. I forgot. I want to quickly say about, can you own private business in China? Most of the businesses in China, small business, they're all private. State-owned companies, they have large scale, but I think they're compared to private business, it's a smaller percentage. You definitely can own your business, and the small business government for lots of them don't have to pay tax. People just government wants them to have a way to support themselves, hire people. They don't pay taxes because I have relatives working in the taxation bureau. Small business, lots of them they're exempt. They don't have to pay. About the land ownership, if you buy apartment, you own that for 70 years. Well, because China, the development is pretty new. There are a few cases the property reached the 70-year lease, and then you just sign another lease. The people in this building continue to own their property. Well, maybe it's not clear now what they will do when they need to demolish the building. But the current practice, when you reach that 70-year mark, you continue to own. You pay some fee, and you continue to own that property. But the land, the piece of land that building is sitting on, that is owned by the state. And in the countryside now, some workers, they go to the coastal cities to work, and basically the whole family immigrated. And now there is a redistribution of some land. They don't want the land to go waste, right? But they cannot sell the land to some rich person and to concentrate.
I mean, Kelly, because they're so authoritarian, they bring their money here. Like a couple years ago, I tried to sell my house. Chinese lady from China was going to buy it for $1 million. They're buying millions of dollars in property in Canada. They're buying farmlands in the United States.
Hey, wait a moment though. That's true for every class of rich people in every country. They buy property globally. I mean, in China, you think that they're not able to have thriving businesses?
Well, they're trying to get out.
No, they're not. No. Listen. In China, if you're a regular person, you want to start a small business, you can do that far easier in China than you can in America, because in America we have all this red tape and all these restrictions and so on that make it so hard for a normal person to start a business. In China, they have a thriving small business sector. As she mentioned, they have a thriving private small business sector in China. People are now running away from China. People, if anything, people are investing in China. Money has been running into China. I mean, look at all the American jobs and that have gone to China because of China's
They're bringing their money here.
process.
They're trying to get their money out.
They're not
using Bitcoin to get their money out.
Listen. The people you're talking about are so let me put it this way. So in America, you have people who put their money in tax havens, right? To basically protect their money from taxes, et cetera, and so on. In China, you also have some class of people, some are not patriotic, who do not represent the general sentiments of their people. And yeah, they may try to invest in foreign countries. Yeah, but so what? It's the majority of the people who matter when it comes to whether or not the Chinese state is actually being successful. It's not these handful of international elites. China works for the majority of the people, and it's that simple. The Chinese economy works for the majority of the people. In China, there's been a more successful anti-poverty campaign than anywhere else in the world. China's been more successful at relieving poverty than any country in the world. It's relieved more people from poverty than any country of the world, while also still supporting a new Chinese middle class and what they call, I think they call this the China Dream. China is unleashing the forces of production in such an unprecedented way that's never been seen before. America in the 20th century was advanced, okay? America grew really fast in the 20th century, and America did revolutionize the forces of production to an extent, right? But now China has learned from both the mistakes and the successes of America and is now the most advanced economy in the world. The Chinese model, as far as planning the economy goes, is more advanced than any country in the world. Their 5-year plans are more successful than our 5-year plans. And yes, we do have 5-year plans. It's just instead the government doesn't tell you that, they just lie about it. But our 5-year plans fail. There's work. That's the difference.
I want to give an example about the Chinese social mobility. So in a big city like in Shanghai, Shenzhen, in the evening, if you go out around the high-rises, fancy apartment buildings, you would see young people, in those cities, you have to have a good education to have a good job. So they obviously have good education. They might have a young kid, but you'll see the parents, maybe in the 50s, in the 60s, they're clearly from the countryside. And you can see it from the clothes, from the face. They had a hard life before, and then you see their offspring next to them. You can see the social mobility. It's just so common. It's there because young people, they study hard. They go to pass the entrance exam, go to a good college, get education. That's social mobility, and you don't have to get into debt. It's basically free. High education. Now China has put out some policies to change the education system to be less competitive, to accept more young people. But the social mobility, if you go to the big city, you can see the big jump. I think that's just a very that's the big potential force. You don't see it here. It's everything's in the same family. It's if you're middle class, your kids are likely to be okay, if no economic crash. But in China, the peasants' kids can get a very good education and have a bright future. So social mobility is awesome there.
Well, you have social mobility and social scoring. Hey, Tom has his hand up, Henry.
Hey, wait a second. So we want to speak about social scoring. Actually, if you want to learn more about the so-called social credit system, we have a video on that, actually. And what we actually found out when we were looking into it is that, so in the past, China used to have a problem where these companies would act corruptly, or they would have bad business practices. They'd be selling failed products, etc. It's all kinds of bad business practices. And there was no real way to address that, or it's hard to address that because Chinese governance is actually very localized. It's very much based upon what province you're in, what part of China you're in. And so this so-called social credit system arose as a way of addressing that problem of establishing credit, basically, for these businesses. And the way it works is different for each local part of China. So some places may work differently, some places may work otherwise, because, as I said, Chinese and there's basically a feedback loop between the people. The way the people in these provinces feel about the so-called social credit system, their local states and representatives, and the national government, and this feedback loop allows for the improvement of this system. It's not a system where people are having their privacy violated, or you're going to have something you said on the internet is going to ruin your credit score. It's mainly applied to businesses. Now, there is also Alibaba, and I think Alibaba has something that people confuse for the social credit system, where it's I think it's kind of a score that you get on Alibaba, depending upon maybe your credit practices or so. I'm not 100% sure how that score works, but that's the only score, the only so-called score.
Hey, Henry.
Yeah. But that's by the business, not by the government. Yeah, I get that Tom has his hand up, but if you haven't realized yet, I kind of decide who speaks here. I want to say my piece first. It's that simple. But let's see what Tom has to say. No, you're good. So Tom, what do you want to say?
Yeah. I was trying hard to be very respectful because I'm about. Yeah,
you're good. You're good. Just go ahead.
Yeah, I'm about to piss everybody off equally.
That's fine.
So communism and capitalism have both failed. And the data just shows that unanimously across the board. So the problem with communism, and I'll start there just because it's further along in the failure, is that the leader of the Communist Party and whatever the dominant power is, it used to be Russia, now it's China. It's like Smeagol on Mount Doom. You know, they get the ring of power, they're getting ready to destroy it, and then they say, no, I'm going to keep it. And you see President Xi going down the exact same path that Stalin went down, the exact same path.
Beast.
You know, he's currently getting rid of all of his political opponents, amassing power.
Beast.
Anyway, so he's going down the same road. But capitalism is just as problematic. And if you want to see the data on that, go to WTF happened
Right,
in 1971.
since I think we're mainly interested in communism, let me reply to that. So it seems like the only real thing you presented in your critique of communism is that there are powerful, strong leaders like Stalin and Xi. Well, I have a different perspective on this power. I think that the power of Stalin and Xi is necessary in order for the will of the people to be properly represented. Because as others have pointed out, corruption is a thing, and corruption can happen in communist parties. So the way in which you deal with corruption in a communist party is that you have a popular leader like Stalin or Xi who exercises this mandate of the people they have to wage anti-corruption campaigns. Now, when Stalin did this, he was doing this to root out a fifth column of Nazis who were infiltrating the Soviet Union, and his purges were largely directed against outing Nazi spies. Also, I mean, it was not just Nazis, but that was like maybe the main point of the purge, but also to get rid of the power of these corrupted local party elites. And he did this as a representative of the peasantry, because while he was doing this, he also created the democratic constitution. He also increased the educational level of the peasantry. And if you know anything about democracy, you need education to be able to participate in it, right? You need to be able to read, et cetera, and so on. He greatly raised their literary rates. He made it so that it was so common. It was so common in the Soviet Union for peasants who a generation ago could not read. They were going to see Shakespearean plays and participating in the high arts and high culture. So as this kind of popular representative of the peasantry who for the first time allowed them to fully participate in a Russian civil society and gave them dignity, he exercised his power in this mandate to fight against corruption and Nazism within the party. Now, Xi Jinping, as I said earlier, he's also characterized largely by his anti-corruption campaign, you know, breaking up the power of the triad that has had its kind of shadowy institutional power in China for a very long time, and also curtailing the power of these westernized elites that have started to become more and more numerous. So when Xi exercises his power to get rid of his so-called political enemies, he's acting on the mandate of the people. He's acting as a Chinese patriot, and he's doing this to protect his people from corruption that has started to appear within the party. The problem is that in America, we don't have any powerful, strong, popular leader that actually represents the people and is actually, as Trump would say, draining the swamp. We don't have that in America. Trump pretended to be that, but he failed at that. And so when I speak of communism and why I'm a communist party, a communist party to rise to power, to take leadership of this populistic uprising that's already happening, and to, as a representative of the people, drain the swamp, get rid of the deep state, get rid of the corruption, and return the American Republic to the American people. That's the job of a communist. That's what Xi Jinping did in China. That's what Stalin did in Russia.
Right. So you touched on something, you know, about how Stalin saw capitalist and Western spies around every corner.
No, I said Nazi spies.
Nazi spies.
Yeah, and not around every corner, but yeah.
Xi is seeing American spies, probably saying CIA spies around every corner.
Well, not around every corner, but you're acting as if it's a paranoia. I mean, there was historically documented was a problem of like Nazi infiltrators. Grover Fair has documented this very well. And in China, now in China, you know, it's I guess it's more it's not just like American spies. It's corruption of all kinds, like criminal corruption, right? Like that's why I mentioned the triad. So it's not just foreign corruption. That's part of it, but it's also criminal elements as well, and it's also just normal corruption that happens when you have when you have any political party, right?
Well, yes, I completely agree with you. The concern is legitimate. The actions start out legitimate. But the problem is, what happens when you have this unlimited power? You're sitting there at the top of Mount Doom. You can zap anybody to death the moment you want to. And an advisor comes to you with a very unpopular, bad economic report. Is he a CIA spy trying to give you misinformation just so you'll make a bad decision? And that's the problem. When you take the ring and you don't destroy it in Mount Doom, the evil seeps in, and these people, they hang on to power all of their lives, And a leader can do great things when they have a decade or so. They seep out the corruption, they do the work. But when they do it their whole life, it starts to become like Catherine the Great axing generals just to keep power, It becomes bad.
Let me kind of address the more underlying point you're making. You say there's the ring of power, and when you keep hold of it instead of destroying it, eventually I think the idea you're getting at is that power corrupts, right? You're going to end up misusing that power because you think that power shouldn't exist in the first place. I think that's the main point you're making. Yeah. Well, here's what I would say, and in response, I think there will always be power. There's always going to be power. Maybe there can be a vacuum of power, but eventually someone's going to fill that vacuum. That's why, for example, and I know you don't like capitalism either, but that's why, for example, in America, even though formally speaking, there's no dictator or whatever, we still have the deep state. We still have power. It's just that the power is hidden. So the difference I would say between communism and liberalism is that instead of there being hidden power, the power is in the open, and the power through being public and in the open is, in the last instance, accountable to the people. You say that you act as if they have unlimited power, but they don't have unlimited power. Both the source of their power and the limit of their power is the people. You cannot do anything politically if the vast majority of the people are against you. I mean, that's why, for example, the Tsardom collapsed to begin with. It was because they lost the popular mandate of the people. So Stalin and his actions and so on, the very premise of it was that he had the popular mandate of the people. Now, as far as you say, okay, maybe he started off good at first, but then after a while it goes too far, becomes corrupt, et cetera, and so on. I would say Stalin, throughout his entire life, was pretty much correct. He was pretty much in the right the vast majority of times. I mean, you can criticize them. You can say the purges went too far, and yet, I mean, there probably were some excessive, some excesses of the purges, and there was probably some party leaders who were taking it too far. Yeah, I think we can all agree with that. But on the whole, it was successfully able to keep the party in line. It was able to root out Nazism, and it was able to keep the party in proper shape for being able to later on defeat Nazi Germany. So I would say on the whole, Stalin was successful. He was able to industrialize Russia at an unprecedented pace. He was able to raise the literary rates and the general culture of the Russian people and peasantry to a level that had never been before. And he was able to defeat Nazi Germany. I think the USSR liberated more Nazi camps than anyone else during the war. He was successful at defeating Nazi Germany. So I would say on the whole, Stalin was in the right, Stalin was victorious, and Stalin was the USSR. I think even most communists would agree that corruption did become a problem and that problems did occur. And I think that's a criticism that most communists would make. That's why, for example, most communists will call Khrushchev a revisionist. And this is also the sort of the Sino-Soviet split. And I think it's around this time that China becomes a better representative of communism and the communist movement than the Soviet Union around this time. So yeah, the corruption is a problem. Corruption is a problem that you have to constantly fight against. It's just that I think that these so-called strong leaders are the ones most capable of doing so when they have the popular mandate of the people. And now, if we want to talk about Xi Jinping, I think Xi Jinping has also been successful. One of his things that he started was an anti-poverty campaign. I mentioned that earlier. But it's been an extremely successful anti-poverty campaign. China's lifted more people out of poverty than any other country in the world. As Skyline mentioned earlier, in part because of this, there's a lot of there's more social mobility. Maybe if your parent may have been poor their whole life, but you might have a chance at living in what would be considered more of a middle class middle class lifestyle, etc. And I think the Chinese people have experienced, even in their lifetimes or in their children's lifetimes, a drastic improvement of living conditions. Now, as far as Xi Jinping's anti-corruption campaign, I mean, it's harder to measure something like that than it is to measure poverty. But I think Xi Jinping has the mandate of the people when it comes to this, because even Western studies, when they'll look and see approval ratings, not just the Chinese ones, but like Harvard studies, will basically say that like 95% or 98% of the people are behind the president, are behind Xi Jinping. So I think he is acting on popular mandate with this anti-corruption campaign. I honestly, legitimately think he is. And I mean, if you look at who are the people being targeted, I mean, some of the times the people he's targeting are like literal billionaires who are selling out their country. So, I mean, can you blame him there? I don't think so.
Yeah, but it doesn't matter. Henry, the thing is that there's always going to be a fevered ego at the top of every pyramid.
You're psychologizing it too much. You're making it too psychological.
But Stalin is a mass murderer.
No, Stalin, listen. Stalin, what do you mean by mass? Like, Stalin is only a mass murderer. Wait a second. Stalin is only a mass murderer in the sense that every leader of every state is a mass murderer. Stalin, most of the people killed by Stalin were Nazis. I mean, that's just true. Like, what do you mean? Like, what are you referring to specifically?
Yeah, he killed like 500,000 of those Nazis in Ukraine back in the day.
You're talking about the Holodomor? Are you talking about that?
I don't know.
I will tell you this. What you're doing here is you're taking a famine that existed, right? And you're making that out to be a direct, like, equivalent with direct murder. It's just not. So the collectivization in early stages. Wait a second. The collectivization is early stages. It did correspond to turmoil among the peasantry and the farmers, et cetera, and so on, because they were drastically changing the way in which agriculture was done. And if you drastically change something like that, there's going to be difficulties. But this was a necessity for the industrialization that it would form the basis of. Basically, he had to use the agricultural surpluses for industrialization. And if you actually look at agriculture during the period of Stalin, in general, agricultural yields went up. It's just that at the beginning, because he was drastically changing so much.
Let me ask you because he
was industrializing so fast. There was, obviously some consequences, but I don't think you can really avoid that with industrialism. Industrialism, everywhere in which it has appeared, has corresponded to some degree of catastrophe. The difference is that,
Henry,
go ahead.
I think you're a bright. I don't know how. I'm in my 50s. It sounds like you're a bright kid, and you've read a lot more than I ever will. But in my experience, like, in your opinion, don't you think like every successful civilization has a couple of elements? Like in this country, in America, it's successful because we have private property and freedom of speech. What do you think about that?
I think that when America has been successful, it has been because of free speech. As far as private property goes, I think that private property has been really like I don't know. I guess it depends on what you mean by that. I guess America has private property in the same sense that China has private property, because I think in America the economy is also very much organized by the state. I think America has socialism for the rich. But as far as like the Constitution goes, freedom of speech, yeah, I do think that the Constitution was a great achievement of American civilization. That's why, for me, I think that it's these corporate influences, the media, and big tech platforms that are stepping all over the Constitution. I mean, look at the way people are censored online. So for me, as far as communism goes, one of the first things that a communist party, one of the first duties of the Communist Party would be to restore freedom of speech and the American Constitution. So yeah, I completely agree with you that the Constitution's an important part of American civilization. Is that kind of like answer your question?
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, I think the reason why there's a lot of confusion is because a lot of socialists in America, and I was explaining this earlier. So a lot of socialists in America, they hate America, they hate American values, et cetera, and so on. We at Infrared, we're not those kind of socialists. We're communist, and even if you disagree with how we're trying to do it, we are authentically trying to make America great again. We want to make America a great, strong country again.
Yeah, and this argument about famines and communism killing people through famine, it's like, capitalists are pretty much equally guilty of that. I mean, look up what Churchill did to India.
Yeah.
It's pretty horrific. The debate between communism and capitalism is over who allocates resources the most efficiently, and that's where the debate needs to be, because we need to think ahead of the curve, because the truth is humans are only 500 generations old. Your 500th great-grandmother was the first speaking human to ever exist. We are still primitive animals wandering out of the wilderness, vicious, covered in mud. We have no clue what's going on. But the truth is, in our lifetimes, we are going to be able to mine asteroids in the asteroid belt beyond Mars, and the resources on one asteroid contain everything we need, from water to gold to semiconductors to lithium to iron to copper, all of it. And that is going to end scarcity. And I'm going to be honest with you, capitalism and communism both are just outdated philosophies that are not equipped to handle that kind of environment.
I agree
with Tom. That's the thesis I came to speak today.
Exactly.
Let me give my perspective on this. As far as ideology goes, I think when it comes to the most foremost cutting edge developments in technology in production, I think that not only is communism equipped for this, but I think it's already starting to happen in China. I mean, in China, and not just this though, but the very way in which you think about science, for example. I think that communism can change the very way in which you think about science and understand science to begin with. So this is a little bit different than what you were mentioning, but for example, we in our community we have there's this Russian scientist called Lysenko, right? And he was very ahead of his time. He used from the practical results he got from different experiments he was doing to figure out how to grow more food. He used dialectical materialism. This is the underlying philosophy of Marxism to explain why what he saw was going on. And guess what? The scientific establishment hated him. Everyone hated him and so on, but he was able to increase agricultural yields. I feel like communism and dialectical materialism and Marxism actually provides us a kind of a new way of looking at things and at science that can allow us to mine those asteroids better, to get to those asteroids faster. The whole point of communism is... Wait one second. Just wait 1 second.
Restrict yourself to an idealism, though. That's
what you saying?
Why are you restricting yourself to certain ideals? Putting yourself
but that's
Tom's right.
That's the thing.
We should go beyond this. We should go to the stars. You're still stuck here in the 18th century.
That's the thing, though. That's the beauty about communism. Communism is the first ideology to be materialist. That's what I was trying to explain earlier, is that communism is not just a dogma. Marxism is not just a dogma. The whole point of Marxism is that it continually revolutionizes itself and becomes more advanced based upon practice. So let's say you have a communist. Let's say they fail at something. They learn from that. They do it better next time. Let's say they succeed at something. They learn from that and they can repeat that success. Marxism and communism, I see it as an index of historical experiences that we can learn from to be able to be more advanced and greater in the future. We have this guy called Caleb Maupin. He's not in infrared, but he's part of our wider community. And how instead of, how there's supposedly a climate crisis instead of all that stuff, he talks about how instead of just instead of limiting our resources, et cetera, and so on, limiting the population, we should go to the asteroid and mine the asteroids. He talks about how growth is limitless. For we communists, we don't believe there's a limit on growth. For us, growth is limitless. We want to unleash the forces of production and take society to heights it's never seen before. And that is one of the most fundamental and primary goals of communism. You know the way in which communist revolutions happen? It's not because their political ideals were better than the political ideals of the people who were in power. It's because they took charge of these objective advancements and revolutions in the forces of production that outmoded the old classes or the old political groups. And what I'm trying to do, what we're trying to do in America is something similar. We think that in America, these advancements in technology and in the productive forces are in contradiction with the elites in their plan. And we think that we can take these advancements in technology and these forces of production far further than they can. Because with their plan of, their great reset agenda of you will own nothing, you'll be happy. I mean, what kind of future is that? That's a future of serfdom. And they also have this green agenda, right? They have this green agenda where they want to limit growth. They want to limit our industrial growth and progress for the sake of so-called saving the environment or preventing fossil fuel emissions. We don't want to limit growth. We want to do the exact opposite. We think that these people in charge now are incompetent, they're foolish, and they have a degrowth agenda, and we want to counter that with our growth agenda. We simply seek to do nothing more than take leadership of these revolutions in technology and in production and take them to their limit. That's what we want to do. We want to, so I even made a Twitter post about this earlier. The way in which we communists approach, for example, the climate crisis is not that, we need to stop using oil, we need to degrow. No, we need to grow such that we can adapt to the changing environment and so on.
How is communism different from globalism and Klaus Schwab?
I'll explain. So the globalists, the kind of ideology the globalists have is this. They believe that there's a global community based upon sharing the same liberal values. And for them, this is more important than your nationality, your country, et cetera, and so on. All of that becomes just erased and absorbed by these globalist liberal values. That's what they represent culturally on a cultural level, right? For communists, we have a different view of internationalism. For us, the primary significance for a communist is at home. It's in your own country. It's being a patriot in your own country and fighting for your own country. That's the first and most fundamental task of a communist. So in terms of culture and in terms of how we relate to, the international community, there is that. We believe in win-win relationships, but it's based upon love for your own country and for your own people, not for these globalist liberal values, et cetera, so on. Now, as far as my economic vision, our economic vision, and their economic vision. So I think right now we're undergoing what some people call the fourth industrial revolution. And they're in the way in which the economy is organized is going to be drastically changed. But what they have in mind is that you're not going to own anything. You're going to rent everything that you use. Everything you use is going to be rented. And you're basically going to be kind of like a serf, right? You're not going to have you're not going to own anything. For us, it's the opposite. There is going to be this revolution in the way the economy is organized. But for us, one of the most important political objectives is land reform, which is giving people some kind of fundamental means of production. It can be literal land. It could be like a UBI, or it could be like an automated car or something if automation gets further. It could be anything like that, giving them the education needed to use it, and then allowing them with that means of production, that land, that property, that their own property. They can start their own businesses. They can do their own thing. They can have some kind of property basis in the new world. So I guess the main difference between us when it comes to economics is that we want people to be able to own stuff and have property. They want you to only rent everything. I want to save the small businesses in America that were just torn apart by the deep state agenda that was pushed through during COVID. That's what I want. All right. Either of you guys can speak if you want to.
Okay, sick.
Yeah. You go ahead. I've already weighed in.
Yeah, for sure. Don't worry about it. I have a couple things. So first, let me get this right. Are you repeating the myth of infinite growth, or did I misinterpret something?
What do you mean by the myth of infinite growth?
Oh, just like the capitalist.
As to what will be, what is redistributed. Like you say, it could be land. I feel it has to be land, and that it's.
I think literal land will be a big part of it. Yeah. I don't know if it'll only be land. Let's put it that way. I don't know if it will only be land. I would.
But land for me is the most. I mean, not just for me, but like for everyone, is the most important part. Period.
It's the most fundamental. It's just the reason why I'm open here is because this kind of 21st century land reform it's very new, and what will be like most central to it's more of an open question. But yeah, I do think literally land it will be a part of it. And I think it is. I think land, as I said before, is the most fundamental means of production. Right? It's land. So I don't think there's real agreement there. But I think
but also not only that, like we have the reason that this whole like brain rot of liberalism, not liberalism, but like this whole Great Reset agenda has spread so far is because there are so many landless people. And when people don't have land, they feel disconnected from their own land, and they are no longer. They're no longer feel inclined to be patriotic.
Right, they become uprooted. Yeah. I agree with you there. Yeah, so I completely agree with you.
So land is kind of the most important thing.
Oh, dude, I have such a great point on this. Can I?
Yeah, go ahead.
So you should Google Earth Beijing sometime. It looks like a giant honeycomb because China solved this problem like 800 years ago.
Yeah, that sounds awesome.
Googling it.
But this isn't China. I wish. Well, this like also like we need to. One thing that I think we should preempt is this idea that there's not enough land for everybody.
There is. Yeah.
America's enormous.
It's one of the biggest countries in the world.
Exactly. Yeah, but I think it's like something we should be ready for. Is this talking point, because they already do degrowth, is this whole idea that like, oh, there's just not enough to go around. They already have this. They're going to apply it to land too, which is just
there's plenty of land out there for like the rightful owners of the land who are not fucking white people.
Oh my God, here we go again. Listen,
bro, come on. Like, what are you talking about?
Listen, everyone in America,
you shouldn't try.
Everyone in America, who's speaking right now?
You shouldn't try and reconcile the genocide of the the American settler project. I don't think that should be reconciled with communism in any way.
Can you guys hear me? Can you guys hear me?
No, we can't.
Okay, so here's the thing. You say that communism should not reconcile what you call like the American genocidal settler colonial project. But for me, there is no communism without the country of America. In America, the very context.
Why?
Because as Marx said, the form of communism is national. He says the form of proletarian struggle is national. There has to be a context to it. That's why. Communism. It's. I'm gonna mute you guys so I can speak. Communism, in essence, may be universal, but in form, it is national. And what they mean by this is that it's determinate. It's based in a specific country or a specific civilization or a specific nation. This is what Marx believed. This is what Stalin believed. This is what Mao believed, etc. This is a commonality throughout the Marxist-Leninist approach. I mean, why do you think in China they have socialism with Chinese characteristics? Because the form of it is national. So the idea that we're reconciling communism with the American settler colonialist project is itself as a premise just completely ridiculous and absurd, because as an American communist, the only relevance it even has to begin with is to the American people, the whole American people. Now, you say that you act as if the natives are the only ones who have rightful ownership to the land of America. Well, I don't agree with that. Everyone who has lived in this country, worked in this country, built this country, has a right to the land in this country. Someone built your house, someone provides you your food. People actually work and build this country. The people who worked and built this country have a right to it. And that's been Native Americans, that's been white Americans, that's been Black Americans, that's been Hispanic Americans. We are all American. We all have a right to the land here. We all have a right to give land to one group in America. It's just absolutely stupid, impractical, and makes no fucking sense whatsoever. It's the dumbest thing ever. I was having a good conversation, and then I just heard one of the dumbest ideas I've ever heard in my life, which was this land back idea. It's really stupid. It's just really, really stupid.
Yeah, we gotta get it over.
Okay, but I'd like to refute that point.
Go ahead.
Because you're talking about nations as if they are these static, unchanging, material thing. No,
That's
but you kind of are, because you're saying that the communist
You're
saying that the communist movement must be rooted in some kind of national context, as if
the
that
national context is the real movement itself. That is the emotion that is in reality right now. Which context like you who are cucks and alienated from society, you actually don't adjust to these real realities. That's why you're a cuck. That's why you lose That's why communists haven't done shit in the last 40 years.
No, the nation is an immaterial body. It's a
no, oh my God, wait a second. You're literally an idealist. You think that
he's idealist.
No, here's the thing. You're right. The nations don't stay the same. They're not static, right? But that's because material reality itself is dialectical. It's in motion. Nations are real and they are material. They're not ideas. They're not political ideas. Okay. No, they have objective significance. They have objective. The way in which you think, the things you believe, the way in which you think, all of that is based in national realities that you yourself can't control. The reason why nations are material is because you don't just create them in your mind or with your thoughts. They are objective and they're unconscious. That's why, for example, even though you're trying to reject America, your whole idea of land back is one of the most American things ever. And this political ideology of land back exists pretty much only in America. It comes from America. It's one of the most American things ever because you are still American no matter how much you try to escape it. You will always be American. And that's just an objective reality. Nations do have objective material reality. If you think they're just ideas, well, you're not a Marxist. You're just not a Marxist. Maybe you're a socialist, but you're not a Marxist and you're not a communist because Marxists are materialist. You are an idealist.
And a cock. And he's a cock. I'm you too.
Sorry, can I just get one last word in, like, without being muted?
Go ahead, just make it fast.
Yeah, dude, come on.
Make your shitty point.
I will make it fast. So, first of all, being a materialist, such as Marx is, does not mean that you believe things are material. To be a materialist means that you are using a frame of analysis where you are analyzing material conditions. Now, I'll say again, the state is not a material.
The nation isn't the state. Wait, the nation's not the state. Do you not know the difference between nations and states? Have you not read anything about the national question? You actually think that nations and states are the same thing?
No, I did not.
Why did you use state? And why did you use state in place of nations in that context? We were never talking about the state. We were talking about the nation.
I mean, I misspoke. Are you gonna like?
I just think there's maybe a deficiency.
I just think that you're fucking coping so far.
Well, then make an argument. Prove it. What's your argumentation? Wait a second. No.
This is where Alpha.
Wait a second. I just want him to get his argument out. Since his argument is so brilliant, I just want him to finish his argument, and then we'll completely tear it apart.
Hell, let's ask him. What's the difference between a nation and a state? Can you answer that for us, cockboy?
Muslim Joe, can I say this to you? إن على بطاريسك.
ليه يا زلمة شو مالك؟ أنو اللي حكى هالزاي. That's really fucking unkind.
Can you please just make your point?
No, honestly, I would like an apology for being sworn at.
Get the fuck out of here.
No, you're not getting an apology. I'm just muting you again. So you did make a point while you were talking. You were saying that when Marx talks about materialism, it's a method of analyzing material conditions. It doesn't mean that things are real or things are material. Well, I would say it actually means both. I mean, it's in the premise of what you said. How do you analyze material conditions if there are no material conditions in the first place? There are material conditions, and nations are one of them. I mean, if you want to reference, wait a second. If you want to reference Marx, I can give you a direct quote from Marx in which he says that the form of the class struggle is national. That's what he says. Stalin says the same thing. He says that the form of culture is national. Mao makes sense. Mao goes even further. He says that the socialism must be informed by national characteristics. Where do you think socialism with Chinese characteristics come from? The fact that the form of socialism, of communism, etc., is national has been a commonality throughout Marxist forever.
He's laughing at Marx. Look, he's like laughing. He thinks it's funny what Marx said.
I know. So like, it's one thing if you're going to say, it's one thing if you're just going to give you're a Marxist, you're coming from a Marxist perspective. Well, then based upon what Marx himself said and what Marxist-Leninists have said, that's just completely incorrect.
Dude, he said he can't touch the state. He can't touch the state, so it's not real. What kind of dumb shit is that?
That's really.
What do you think an unconscious? What do you think an unconscious reality is? How do people even come to having beliefs and culture and these ideas? You think it just comes out?
And there's actually a deeper wisdom here too, because most so-called Marxists are not actually materialists; they're substantialists. They think that the only thing they're like empiricists, basically. They think that the only thing that's real are things you can see, touch, and feel, etc.
They're Luna Oyas.
Yeah. But in reality, when Marx is talking about the material, he's talking about it in the context of decades and decades of the development of German philosophy, which itself already critiqued imperialism, starting with Kant. he's not talking about the empirical thing. He's talking about something more objective, more real than what you see, touch, and feel. He's talking about the very thing that gives rise to appearances, to the empirical world in the first place.
How is Hegel any different from what this guy's saying? Because I mean, Hegel deals with the external first, like first and foremost.
Hegel's a lot smarter, because even before Hegel, like Kant just completely destroyed empiricism in the idea that the real was what you can see, touch, and feel. I mean, one of the main significances of Kant, for example, was that there's the appearance and then there's the thing in and of itself, which is more real than the appearance. Now, he had a lot of mistaken ideas as well. But this distinction between the form and the content, the essence and the appearance, the material and the substantial, never goes away. It's contained within Marxism. When Marx talks about the object, the materialism, he's not just talking about what you can see, touch, and feel. He's talking about the very basis for those things you see, touch, and feel. He's talking about, in a Freudian sense, he would be talking about the unconscious. He's talking about something that's beyond, like that premises what you observe. It premises your senses. It premises your way of thinking. It premises your way of being. All right, go ahead if you got a rebuttal.
Yeah, well, I think there are material conditions that, I don't know what's the word, inform or catalyze the formation of the state. And I think the state itself has.
We're talking about the nation. We're talking about nations. Can we get on topic, please?
Okay. Yeah. So I mean, I think he's sort of the same thing. But I mean, for one, socialism with Chinese characteristics was sort of a deviation from trends of rule or trends of policy under Mao. For one, I mean, Soviet.
Actually, no. Wait a second. It's rooted in Mao. It's rooted in Mao's own words. I can find you a quote on this. Actually, I just need 1 second.
Everything. Listen, I hate the phrase "Deng's reforms." Deng's reforms begins with Mao.
Soviet communism extremely discouraged Russian nationalism and nationalism from other parts of the Soviet Union.
Wait a second. Actually, I can quote Mao. I can quote Stalin. If you want to start with Soviet communism, when he speaks about culture, he says that culture, the form of culture, is national. Whether it's proletarian culture or bourgeois culture, the form of culture is national. Now, the fact that the form of culture is national is not the same as nationalism. When we talk about the critique of nationalism, we're talking about the critique of European nationalism, which starts with the European nation states. And for Stalin and in the USSR, while they don't completely liquidate national realities in the way that you do and the way you think, they see that there's a unity between there's a higher unity, the Soviet identity, which goes beyond these national distinctions. In China, this is taken even further, because in China, the separate nations in China are not even formally speaking separate republics. So, I mean, what you're saying is just a complete misunderstanding of their critique of nationalism. They're not critiquing the nationalism by saying that nations aren't real. That's not how they criticize nationalism. No, you want me to quote Stalin? Do you just want me to? I'll do it. Just give me 1 moment.
No, I'm laughing at the way you made fun of him. It's just like that's how they think. He's just so stupid. You know?
Yeah,
I can't touch the.
I'll quote Stalin for you right now. Since you want to talk about the U.S. No, 1 second. Let me just read this to you. The period of the dictatorship of the proletariat and the building of socialism in the USSR is a period of the flowering of national cultures that are socialist in content and national in form. That's Stalin in his report to the 16th Congress of CP 1930.
No, I appreciate you sharing that quote, and it helps me understand sort of like your stance and where you're coming from.
You want me to reference Mao? Because you said that socialism with Chinese characteristics was against Mao's views. But, it was actually Mao's insight that laid the path for this. If you just give me a moment, I'll show you what I'm referencing, actually.
Did Mao adopt the policy of socialism for Chinese characteristics?
I mean, his ideology laid the path. Yeah. He was. I mean, yeah, in a way, yes. I mean, that's what the Cultural Revolution really was. It was a revolution against Soviet influences and what allowed China to take its own path beyond simply adopting the Soviet-style Marxism. And I just found the quote from Mao. This is what he says. He says this: the universal truth of Marxism must be combined with specific national characteristics and acquire a definite national form. So so socialism of Chinese characteristics, ideologically speaking, it is rooted in Mao Zedong thought. Deng Xiaoping, you know that Deng Xiaoping did not completely agree with Mao, but you know he was a student of Mao Zedong thought, and he did spread Mao Zedong thought.
Their biggest disagreement.
You don't see a difference between you know, the national characteristic of a country like Russia or China and versus the national characteristic of America, which by and large, you know, through, you know, when you're looking at the national culture, right, versus the state institution, you see in both of those two categories the permeation of a culture of genocide and settler colonialism, and a whole lot.
Yeah, so let me respond to that. So one, I think you're being an extremist when you say we have our national culture is a culture of genocide. That's not true. That's simply not true. Now you may say that there's chauvinism that's in American culture. We do have a problem with chauvinism, racism, et cetera, so on. But our culture is not a culture of genocide. Now, as for why I think it's let me continue though. The reason why I think it's comparable with Russia and with China is because Russia and China are both countries who also have their own dark points in history. So Russia, for example, before the USSR arose, it was called the prison house of nations, right? There was great brutality towards some of the nations within the Russian Empire. They do not have a completely clean history. I mean, in China, they also don't have a completely clean.
That was wrong. Like,
but listen, you're missing the point. Yes, that was a wrong thing, but objectively speaking, every civilization has dark points in history. This does not mean that you reject the civilization itself, because the essence of the civilization is not reducible just to those dark points in history or those problematic things that happened. You're reducing the entire essence of American civilization just to genocide, when that's completely untrue. And that's not even what Marx believed. That's not what Marx, Engels, Lenin, Mao, etc. even believed. I mean, Engels literally said that in America, communists should defend the American Constitution against the bourgeoisie. They should wield the Constitution against the bourgeoisie. And then Lenin, he praised Washington and Lincoln as being great figures. He praised the American Revolution as being one of the most great world historic revolutions in history. Mao Zedong said that Lincoln, if he could have it his way, would have been posthumously made a part of the Communist Party. So this idea that there's nothing to love about American culture or history is just false. Even people who didn't live in America and were communists also appreciated American history and American culture. American culture also includes Hemingway and Langston Hughes and Edgar Allan Poe and great works of literature. Yeah. Henry David Thoreau. American civilization also includes American pragmatism. American civilization includes Protestantism. And you're probably not a Christian, but objectively speaking, Christianity is one of the greatest achievements, spiritual achievements in the history of mankind. And America includes this achievement specifically of Protestant Christianity. America has so many great aspects of its culture. To say that the American culture is just genocide is completely false, completely and utterly wrong.
I would like to say this quote from Stalin. Stalin says it perfectly here: American exceptionalism is posturing, but America is exempt from the general laws of historical development, and that's just plain and true. I mean, that makes sense to me. You're pretending like Americans cannot adopt a proletarian consciousness and expropriate these corrupt bullshitters we have, but that's why you're an idiot. And you say, "Oh, the national reality, I can't see it, so it's not real." Oh, you're a fucking idiot, dude. Like, straight up.
So just to go back to what Henry was saying about like dark points in American history, I'd like to sort of take some of those principles and apply them to like real world situations that have either happened or could happen. So for example, talking about like, well, you know, we might have an air of chauvinism to us, but you know, we're not strictly genocidal. I would disagree with that. I mean, you look at, I think it was maybe just as recently as maybe even 2018, when indigenous people are protesting the construction of a pipeline on their land, which the United States has agreed to give them. You know, they are instantly met with police brutality and force, in some cases evictions and expulsions.
Yeah, but that's an expression of statehood, though, not of the national culture. That's not the same thing. If you're talking about just American culture, that's different, right?
Right.
More
the
so,
national,
the American culture.
You don't understand how the two feed into each other.
No, I do. You don't understand. You don't understand the contradiction.
The state doesn't exist in a vacuum.
Yes,
from the
I
nation.
get that, but you don't.
The nation doesn't exist in a vacuum from the state. So if we're going to talk about, informing our analysis through understanding these dialectical relationships, I think, let's start there.
I will start. I'll start.
Use of force.
Listen. We all know, the problem is this. You're mentioning things that we all know happen.
The problem is that you haven't let me get.
I haven't let you get a point out. You made your point, but your points are just. I just have to be honest with you. Your points are really stupid. I've heard them all before, and you just take way too long to explain them. You're basically saying that the American state still does bad stuff. That's literally all you're saying. The American state still does bad stuff. Now, if you want to talk about the dialectic between the real American civilization and American statehood, well, the entire point I'm making and the entire significance of Marxism and the insight it gives us is that the American state, particularly the deep state, has actually come into a contradiction with American culture. Look at the way the American state works together with these big tech companies to get rid of our free speech, which is one of the most integral parts of our culture. The whole point is that the American state has come into contradiction with American civilization and American culture. Now, if you're speaking specifically of American culture, which you can't just bring up state violence in a vacuum, because even if they are related to each other, they're not the same thing. I'm saying that the American culture it's not genocidal. Essentially and fundamentally speaking, it's not genocidal. You can say the American state still does horrible and awful things. That's completely true. No one would agree with you. But that's not one-to-one the same with American civilization. And like I said, my entire point is that American civilization and the American state and the American empire have come into a contradiction with each other. That's why both on the right and on the left, you have these populists who are becoming anti-war and starting to not buy the establishment and buy what the American state is doing. I think that if we work together with populists on both sides of the aisle, we come together based upon a common interest, which is to overthrow the American deep state, which is destroying the culture of America. It's destroying this country, really. We can work out a lot of these national differences, and we can work through a lot of this chauvinism that we have based upon our common interest, which is the overthrow of the American deep state. If you think the American state represents patriotic American culture, that's just completely and utterly wrong. What the state pushes for is what most more conservative and traditional Americans hate more than anything else. Traditional Americans don't at all agree with the currently existing American state. They don't at all agree with that. That's just completely, utterly false. There is a contradiction between the real America and American statehood. And it's not even just me who said this. There was a video we made called "Socialist Patriotism: America versus America," and the point being that the real deep civilizational roots of America and the American people are in contradiction with the American empire. Guess where we got that title from? It wasn't from a right winger. It wasn't from an American patriot. It was from a Chinese guy. That's where we got the title from. The fact that there's a contradiction between the American state and the American people, that's just, I think at this point, that's very much common sense. I think it's very much common sense at this point. And I just don't think you're making really good points. I really just don't think.
Because they think Americans are like demons they think Americans are some kind of demonic people who there's brutality and there's no fixing it. If you can't
recognize the distinction between civil society and statehood, that's just stupid. I've been trying to be generous here, but I have to point out the fact that this guy's been conflating nation and state throughout the entire argument, and he just keeps doing it. There is a distinction here between the American civilization and the American state. Now I'll give it.
Yeah, listen, most it's common. Look, dude, when you talk to the American dude, they're this is what they'll tell you. They'll say America's fucking corrupt. They believe in every conspiracy, and they think politicians are corrupt and evil. That's a direct contradiction with the statehood itself. That's a real reality. How is it? Why are Americans patriotic but also ashamed to be American? How is that that's an interesting dialectic, which cucks like this guy, they don't know how to reconcile it. And that's why they get their ass whooped by Republicans all the fucking time.
And guess what? It's the more patriotic Americans, the more conservative and traditional Americans who hate the American state more than anyone else. And the American state right now is run by a bunch of liberals who don't believe in real American traditions and in real American culture. They're trying to destroy the family. So, I mean, it's like everything is the exact opposite of what he thinks. Like, the American state is not led by these patriotic conservative people. It's led by globalist liberals.
When you said they're damaging the family, these cucks are like laughing. But even though like Engels makes the same point, like the bourgeois statehood destroys the family, and the whole point of proletarian dictatorship is to introduce a new familyhood. He directed.
Well, it's not even just like a new familyhood. It's that, as he says.
Look at the revisionists. Look at the revisionists laugh. Look at them.
Well, no, literally, I can find the quote. I mean, Engels himself says that the duty of the communists is to return family life to being a part of your private life. It no longer becomes an object of political meddling. It becomes your private life. I can find he says this in Principles of Communism. I'll just find it real quick.
I know Marx speaks about this in the manifesto. But yeah, they're laughing because they're revisionists. They think what Marx says is like funny.
Okay, this is what Engels says about the family in Principles of Communism. It's Principle 21. He says, "What will be the influence of communist society on the family?" He says this: "It will transform the relations between the sexes into a purely private matter, which concerns only the persons involved, into which society has no occasion to intervene. It can do this since it does away with private property and educates children on a communal basis, and in this way removes the two bases of traditional marriage, the dependence rooted in private property of the women on the man and of the children on the parents." But then let's continue here, because so he says something interesting after this. "And here's the answer to the outcry of the highly moral Philistines against the community of women. The community of women is a condition which belongs entirely to bourgeois society, and which today finds its complete expression in prostitution. For prostitution is based on private property and falls with it. Thus, communist society, instead of introducing community of women, in fact abolishes it." In other words, with the communism, as opposed to like this like idea that they have about, oh, we're all going to be polyamorous, oh, we're going to have it's going to be like going to have like 5 women and 10 guys all in the same relationship, etc. No, it's the exact opposite. Communism,
right here.
Communism gets rid of the community of women and this prostitution and this polyamorous shit that they're trying to force onto the American working class. It gets completely rid of this. Completely utterly rid of this. If anything, communism would be one of the most monogamous ideologies there is.
Also, like Marx is right here, he says abolition of the family, but I think he means sublate because I think it is a transition issue. But he goes on to say he defines what is the bourgeois family. He says it's on capital and private gain. So he's talking about abolishing the bourgeois family, which what replaces that? Well, it's a proletarian family for him. Right, it's just simple dialectics. And
this point that Engels makes as well in the Principles of Communism, people really need to focus on what he says when he says it will make family a purely private matter. This means all these the sole cultural goal as far as culture goes for communists, it should be to return these cultural issues of sexuality and family back to the private sphere. That should be the full stop. That should be it. But anyways, I'm going to let them speak. Oh, he left.
Let CB. I don't give a fuck who can speak. CB speak. The other person you're going to raise, 12er, you can speak.
Hey, I heard you talking about deep state earlier, and I'm going to push back on that. How the fuck do you measure the depth of a state? That's literally a reactionary dog whistle used by Alex Jones types. Like, what the fuck?
Okay. So I'm gonna respond to that. It's really, really, really simple. The deep state is an objectively existing institution or a group of institutions that are themselves not formally a part of statehood. Like, for example, the military-industrial complex, the mainstream media, big tech, and also just in general these private interests or these bourgeoisie that basically buy off our politicians. It's an objectively existing thing. If you think America is just the people you see on TV, the formerly existing state, you are an idiot and you know nothing about America.
Yeah, this DB guy, he's a Paul Matic fan. He's a Paul Matic.
Yeah, but you can simplify it even further. They're really just unelected officials and permanent groups of interests that do not change no matter what party comes out.
Yeah.
So, yeah, like the
intelligence community. The intelligence community is like the best example. Like the CIA and the Pentagon, stuff like that. I mean, and now he says this is Alex Jones type talk. Well, guess what? I like Alex Jones more than I like you. I do. I just do. And you can cry about that, whatever. But guess what? Alex Jones was one of the only people who went against American imperialism when Bush went to war against Iraq. Alex Jones was one of the only people skeptical of that. Okay? So, yeah. So you can say I'm an Alex Jones type. Well, okay. So what? Alex Jones is more of an anti-imperialist than you are. Go ahead.
I would like to add real quick, there's not one deep state. There are multiple.
Swear to God.
And the Constitution was actually designed to make them compete against each other. The problem is with our modern politics is that they have all gotten aligned due to the infection of neoliberalism. We invented the CIA and the FBI to be separate branches so that authority would not become coalesced behind one political power. But the reality is that they are both sort of on the same page now, and it's just become so entrenched with bureaucrats that flop between both of the departments. They go back and forth, and it's just so the deep state gets more aligned by the day, and that's what the trouble is. But the truth is, there are multiple deep states, and the way you break them up is to separate them.
Well, I think what you're saying is basically similar to what I'm saying, but maybe in a different way. You're saying that there's basically different institutions that are within the deep state, and they don't always all have the same interest, but now they're more or less working together. Well, I mean, I would agree with that. We're just using different language at that point, I think. And I do think that there are some times in which the deep state has contradictions. Like, for example, George Soros and Larry Fink, the BlackRock guy, they're not always completely aligned on everything. So yeah, there are contradictions within the deep state. But I want to see what this guy who thinks they're CB. Yeah, what does CB have to say?
Yeah. Okay.
There is no deep state. If you're going to call out the military-industrial complex, just call it the military-industrial complex. Otherwise, you're feeding into a fucking fascist dog whistle.
Come on.
It's not a fascist dog whistle. It's not. It's a common term that most Americans understand that represents these aspects of American statehood which are not formally a part of the state, still influence the state and influence the country. Yeah, you can speak of the military-industrial complex, but the point is that the military-industrial complex is part of a much bigger, larger web of institutions and communities that more or less work together. I mean, there's a military-industrial complex, but there's also the Pentagon and the CIA. You don't think those two things are related? You don't think the media, which pushes for war, is connected to the military-industrial complex? The point is that there's connections between these different...
Yeah, what's funny?
You're straw-manning me.
You're the one who's straw-manning me by saying that I'm doing a fascist dog whistle because I say the deep state. That's just literally so stupid. What is fascist about pointing out the fact that beyond formally existing American statehood, there are institutions which control our country, like the CIA, like the Pentagon, like the mainstream media, like the military-industrial complex. And yeah, you can say those things individually, or you can just say the deep state, and everyone will know what you're talking about. Because it's a common sense term.
Formally speaking, our Constitution goes against America expanding its political pressure abroad. I mean, Washington directly writes about this in his last farewell speech. So there clearly is something else circumventing our Constitution when it's not supposed to be doing what it does overseas. You should read your founding fathers. CB, go ahead, make your dumb fuck point about how we're fascist, you fucking revisionist, cocky, read Paul Matic. Paul Mac's a fucking revisionist.
Hey, wait a second. Before you make your point, I just want to say one thing. The problem you have with our language is not because it's fascist, it's because we're speaking the vernacular of the people. We're speaking the people's language. Because I want to use a popular term that makes sense to regular people. That's why I speak of the deep state. And you hate that because you hate the people and I love the people. I love the people.
He doesn't have trust in the people. He doesn't have trust in the people. He doesn't have trust in the people's natural instincts. He doesn't believe in them.
He doesn't.
That's why his name's CB and
Paul Matic. No, of course I don't trust normal people. Have you ever seen people fucking
like Paul Matic? Holy shit!
Have you ever seen fucking people try to clip coupons out of fucking cash register?
Listen, when we say we trust the people, we're not talking about on an individual level. We're talking about as a social existence, as a greater thing. Not individual people, but the people.
Just say a quick.
But you're talking about the people as an abstraction.
No, it's not an abstraction. It's the most material and objective thing. The people form the very basis of statehood in any polity in any state, the people are what form the very basis of it. So this is not an abstract.
I only read the founding fathers to criticize
It's not an
them.
abstraction. It's a materially existing thing which forms the foundation of statehood. Now, for a communist, the only significance and the only meaning of communism is love for the people, fighting for the people, and giving expression to the authentic strivings of the people. That's why Lenin didn't just have a proletarian revolution. He united the proletariat with the peasantry, which were at the time the people. The whole significance of communism has always been taking leadership of the people. It's always been loving the people. If you don't love the people, you're not a communist. Now, you might be a socialist of some other kind, but you're not a communist, and you are my enemy. I love the people.
That's why he likes Paul Maddox.
I love the people on a spiritual level. I love the people on a spiritual level,
But you call them all fascists. Their natural instincts, you call this fascism. What they understand to be corruption, you say it's fascism. That's why you like Paul Maddox. That's why you're a fucking cuck. That's literally it. You want to artificially recreate a new culture for people that already live in your country. You hate your own people. You don't even believe in their instincts. That's why you suck. That's why you don't understand the movement. That's why you lose. You take L's. I believe in the people. No, you don't.
I think
you don't even believe in their
the
natural
problem
instincts.
here is that no
You
one's
hate the word they
discussing the
use.
joint dictatorship of the proletariat and oppressed nations, dude.
There is no.
No one here is talking about the.
Wait a second. What do you mean the joint dictatorship of the proletariat and oppressed nations? You realize that the so-called oppressed nations in America, they also have their own proletariat, right? Like, they're not just political. Here's the problem. You think of minorities or whatever as just like political groups that you can use to appeal to them. You don't realize that they have their own class contradictions. They have their own proletariat. They have their own peasantry, etc. And so on. Like, what are you even talking about? As far as what you're saying in practice, which is basically that the white proletariat, the black proletariat, Hispanic proletariat, etc., should unite with each other. I mean, that's something I always say. I always say that. Like, so the actual point you're making is something I always say. I think you just like to hide behind like language. Honestly, I think you just like to hide behind special language that differentiates you from the common people because you're an elitist. You literally just seem like an elitist.
Just like Paul Maddox.
Also,
he has an obsession with purity. That's what the CB is. He has an obsession with purity, just like Paul Maddox. That's why he's a fucking revisionist, because he doesn't actually have faith in the people. He calls him fucking fascist. I mean, what is this? This is bullshit.
So
Alex Jones, dude, do you understand how popular Alex Jones is? He actually gives expression to real realities, unlike you who fucking sits in your basement all day.
Do you know my lived experience of a fucking Alex Jones fan fucking shooting me?
Oh my god, you're gonna freak out.
I don't care about
Go fucking kill yourself.
Wow.
I'm in a dick riding contest, and you guys are all polyamorous on fucking Haz's dick.
Listen. If it was early in the day, I would probably call you a lot of bad names, but at this point, like, I just don't take you that seriously. I just don't. Look.
I don't take you seriously either, dude. You're fucking patriotic for the most. You're patriotic for the most imperialistic nation.
I can prove that you take me seriously. Despite the fact that I mute you, I cut you off, I yell at you, I do all this stuff, you still stand here and you still talk to me because I am someone you take seriously, because I gather a lot of attention, I'm speaking to a lot of people, and I'm spreading my beliefs to a lot of people, and you have to take it seriously. That's why you're still here, even though I mute you. That's why this is my space and it's not your space, because if you made a space, it wouldn't have this many people. I wouldn't be in it. I wouldn't care about it.
Fucking two people.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. Like, and the thing is, like, this guy kind of reminds me of that Tank character, because he's like one of those guys where it's like he's just acting so crazy and just so deranged. He's like, kill yourself. Where it's like I can't even get mad about it, because it's like this guy is.
Yeah,
he's literally just so crazy.
Mad. Yeah, I can't get. All I can do is like cringe.
Like, I don't.
Okay, this is the guy that he needs help.
I don't know if I should like laugh or cringe. Like, he literally just told us to kill ourselves. Like, this is like when it's like this, it's like
yeah, he has problems. We gotta like leave him alone.
That's what I'm trying to say. It's like one of those things where it's like I don't even want to go hard on this guy because he just seems kind of crazy.
Yeah, you can't laugh or like get angry because it's like, okay, he's like different, so let him figure it out.
It's all right if you're different. If you don't, it's all right. But maybe politics is not like the right place for you. If you're like, deranged.
He says he wants to abolish money. He says he wants to abolish.
Commodity money has already been abolished.
CB, what's money? CB, what's money? What's money? Since you want to abolish it so much, we're gonna fucking quiz you. What's money?
Money.
Hey, I'm not a communist, but I like to hear Henry talk, and I think he has a lot of input. Like I'm still learning, I'm in my 50s. I'm still learning new stuff.
Hey, I'm.
All right, let's see. CB, what's money?
Hey, I'm
CB,
glad. I'm glad for that sentiment. I always like talking to people who have different beliefs and reaching out to the other side of the aisle. And I think, as long as we can have a dialogue and stuff like that, we can all mutually grow from it. Because it's not just, you're not just learning from me. I'm also learning from you, and from other people like yourself. That's another part of like why we have these discussions, because it is a dialogue. Anyways, let's see what CB has to say.
CB, what's money? CB, what's money? Let's see if you know what you're talking about. What's money?
Okay, money is the ultimate commodity used to exchange commodities that has social power over everyone who uses it.
So you want to abolish this? You want to abolish this commodity form?
Of course I want to fucking abolish it.
It's already abolished.
Yeah. This is already
That's
happening.
already abolished.
You understand this, right? This is already happening. This happened in 1933. This literally already happened.
When the gold standard ended, that was like the complete end of commodity money. Now money is no longer the universal commodity because money is not backed by commodities anymore.
We're destroying him.
Money is not. You realize that money is not like produced in a factory. It's not.
You can't. You're coping so fucking hard right now. You fucking have dollars in your fucking wallet, dude. Money hasn't been abolished. Currency is still a fucking thing.
They're no longer based in commodities.
You're not money abolitionist because you're not fucking communist, dude.
Commodity money's already been abolished. The money in your pocket is literally paper that can be infinitely printed.
You can still fucking buy fucking commodity.
Yeah, you can buy commodities with it. That's why it's money, but it's not commodity money. That's a common sense distinction. Commodity money is money that is either itself a commodity you have to work for, you have to mine for, you have to produce it, etc., so on, or it's based in a commodity like this. With fiat currency, with money, the basis of its value is not in a commodity that you mine or create.
And Marx predicted this. Marx predicted
it's political. The basis of the dollar is completely and utterly political. You can, just because it's still a universal medium of exchange, but it's not a commodity money. It's money, but not commodity money. And you can go ahead and give the quote from Grundis. I think you're going to reference Revzi.
Yeah, but even then, beyond Grundris, Marx predicts, he calls it the permanent overaccumulation of capital. I mean, that's literally what caused the collapse of exchange value in the first place. And this guy's a revisionist. He doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about. So there's no point even talking to him about it. But listen, there's two schools of thought. You have the Melt School, and then you have the Value Reform School. Both of these schools universally agree that exchange value has collapsed. They all universally agree. But this CB guy, he's like a fanatic, psychopath. So he's like, oh no, you have money in your pocket, so that's it's still capitalism. Oh, you're fucking.
I mean, you realize in the Soviet Union, you can still buy commodities with other things, right?
No, he likes Paul Matic. Paul Matic wrote a really shitty book called "What Is Communism" or some shit. It's called something like that. And the book is like Soviet Union is not communist because it had a commodity, so it's not communist. That's literally what the whole book is about. It's so fucking.
That's
stupid.
literally so dumb. That's literally so dumb. How can money I don't know if he realizes that commodities, they're produced with human labor. Right, he realizes that money is not produced with labor, right? Dollars, you can just print them.
We'll quote Marx. As soon as labor in the direct form has ceased to be the great spring of wealth, labor time ceases and must cease to be its measure. With that, exchange value breaks down. All right, it's that simple. This has already happened. The gold standard, if you want to, you can say by 1971 the gold standard had been completely abolished because that's the collapse of Bretton.
Yeah, I would say 1971. I would say 1971 is the end of commodity money. Yeah.
1933 is like the beginning.
Yeah, you can't even give a direct date of when
we literally just told you
abandonment of exchange value.
1971 the end of
fiat currency still objectively has exchange value. You can still acquire
but the exchange value is not based on commodity. The reason why
it's backed by American imperialism. That's why it has value.
It's backed by American imperialism. It's not actually backed by a commodity. Before the end of the gold standard. Wait a second. Before the end of the gold standard, dollars were actually backed by gold, by an actual commodity that you have to actually work to produce, to mine. Now, money, which is the universal medium of exchange, you no longer have to work to produce it. It's no longer a commodity. It's still money, but it's no longer a commodity. And the basis of the value of the dollar now is entirely politicized. It is politicized.
It's a politicization of actually. Yeah, that's what it did. That's exactly what it did. It fully politicized it for the first time in history.
Exactly. It fully politicized money. It no longer has a basis in labor itself. It no longer has a basis in objectify labor in commodities. That's the only point we're making. Obviously, you can use money to buy stuff. You think? Wait a second. Do you, in your vision, do you think that you're going to abolish exchange? There's no longer going to be trade. You're just wait a second. We're just going to go back to like I got some bread. You want to trade this for some fucking t-shirt?
No,
that's not what fucking communism is. Holy shit, dude. Yeah, that's what I'm trying to tell you. Dude. Like there's still going to be exchange. And communism. There's no money. It's just that there's not commodity money. There's no commodity money. That's the only point I'm making. There's still money, but not commodity money.
Communism is complete decommodification of an entire economy. There is no more exchange. It's not an exchange.
Marx describes communism as a real movement, not this abstraction by you.
Fucking every fucking dingus and every fucking revisionist.
You're a fucking revisionist, bitch. You don't know what the fuck you're talking about. I quote Grundy Reese and you cope about it because you're a fucking revisionist cuck. You know what
and fucking Grundy's here. He fucking says
Volume 3 where Marx talks about, dude, do you understand that the rate of profit has a counter tendency? Those counter tendencies have collapsed. That's why we have this fiat.
Of course I know that.
Work no more. You fucking idiot.
Wait a second. Marx never says...
You can't abolish your way
Wait a second. I don't think Marx ever says that communism is like a complete commodityless society. Now, you may say that commodities might...
He literally calls for abolishing the fucking commodity form, dude. That's what communism is. Holy shit.
What's a commodity, CB?
Wait a second.
CB, what's a commodity?
A commodity is something that is exchanged through trade.
No, okay, now I just know you're stupid. Marx did not want to abolish the exchange of things through trade. Like, what?
He wanted to abolish the value form.
Listen, okay, but if you're talking about the value form, then in a sense you could say that's already been abolished. Because, one... the dollar is itself not a commodity. Money is no longer.
Yes, it is.
Not because it's not produced with human labor. It's not.
No, it's not.
The dollar is not produced with human labor.
Yes, technically it is. Technically, the pieces of paper were
That's not what Marx meant by labor. You know that's not what Marx meant by labor.
God.
You can infinitely produce. The value of the dollar is not based upon how much it costs to produce the dollar. You realize that, right? You can produce thousands.
Oh my God.
So the people who work at the fucking at the Federal Reserve who fucking make new dollars, that's not labor to you?
They're not the ones who actually give value to the dollar.
A printing machine is labor?
They're not the ones. Wait a second. Let me explain this. They're not actually giving value to the dollar. The value of the dollar is not based upon the people who work at the printing machines for the dollar. The value of the dollar is entirely political. I mean, how is it, like, just think about this for a moment. Let's say you print like hundreds of $100 bills. You think that that's actually like the amount of labor that was put into it? Like that's the most insane thing I've ever heard. Like printing more dollars is not labor. And
dude, there isn't even enough gold on Earth to.
Yeah, but even if we say that the people who work around the printing machines or whatever are doing labor, that's still not the basis of the value of the dollar. The value of the dollar is not based upon their labor whatsoever. That's not the basis of the value of the dollar. That's just demonstrably not the basis of the value of the dollar.
Hold on, let's ask CB a basic question. Since he's like the Marxist genie. What's a gold standard, CB? Since you're like the Marxist god.
It takes just as much time to print $100 bill as it does a $1 bill.
Hold on, CB. What's a gold standard?
Right. The gold standard is where everyone understands that gold takes labor to actually get out of the ground, and that's why gold has value, because it actually takes physical labor to get it out of the ground.
God, bro.
Can I throw?
Wait a second. You realize? Wait a second. You realize that like the labor used to create a second. The labor used to make $100 bill is the same as the labor used to create a $1 bill. But so their value is different. This is not the labor theory of value anymore. You realize that, right? Even if you're saying there's labor going into it, this is not the labor theory of value anymore. This is not This is not labor in the Marxist sense. Because,
no, of course not.
So, yeah,
I'm just saying, like, there's technically people who work to make money
but that's
exist.
not the basis of the value of the dollar. The dollar is the value.
Of course not. It's based on exchange value, which is subjective.
That's why it's not a commodity, because the basis of the value of the dollar is not based upon labor.
What the fuck do you mean it's not a commodity?
Because the value of it's not based upon labor. That's why. The value of the dollar is not based upon labor. The value of a commodity.
If it's not a commodity, then why do capitalists go out of their way to get as much money as fucking possible, even though it's based?
Because it's a medium of exchange. It's valuable, but not because it's a commodity, but because of politics. It's political. It's literally based upon American political power.
Is Bitcoin a commodity?
Bitcoin is more of a commodity than fucking fiat. At least you have to do something for that. At least there's some cost for that. Bitcoin's more of a commodity than fucking the paper dollar. The paper dollar is like demonstrably just not a commodity. This is one of the dumbest things I've ever heard in my entire life, that the dollar is a commodity. That's so stupid.
All money is commodities, dude. That's what money is.
No. Money in the time of capital was a commodity, because they were talking about actual like gold or silver. They're talking about actual things that you use labor to produce. And what Marx says is that it's the universal commodity. But now we're in this situation where the universal medium of exchange is itself not actually based upon labor. It's not actually a commodity. It's not produced. The value does not come from labor in the way that a commodity's value comes from the labor time.
When Marx predicts exchange value collapses, what he's saying is that commodities, you can still sell them, but you can't make a profit off them essentially no more. I mean, another way of saying that is the falling rate of profit has won. Like the falling rate of profit has completely collapsed capitalism, and now we don't even run economies off profit no more. I mean, when I read Andrew Kleeman, he gives like a rough estimate that the rate of profit's like 10%. I see other writers say it's like 2%. I mean, economies just don't run off profit no more, and it's just not fundamental. And that's what Marx predicts. Marx predicts the breakdown for capital, for profit. That's what exchange value is. That's why you're a revisionist, CB. That's why I beat.
Let me tell you something else. You're not gonna like. You know, in Marx's time, production was organized by capital. It was organized according to the logic of capital, which is MCM prime. Now, as Rev was saying, economies are no longer organized according to profit. They're organized according to state plans. That's why we literally have the political debates about political policies that will affect the direction of the economy, because the economy has been completely and utterly politicized. The currency has been politicized, and the economy and the direction it goes has been completely politicized.
Yeah, I can't find any Marxist economists who disagree with us here. Like, even Paul Cockshaw would probably make this argument. He's like, yeah, the rate of profit has completely collapsed. It's like negligible. I mean, find me, CB, can you find me any Marxist economists who would disagree with my position? Because I can't find them. Let's go on mute them.
I have a capitalist who agrees with you. So Charlie Munger gave an interview recently where he said the value of the dollar was going straight to zero, and that he recommended hedging your bets against the dollar by purchasing as much stock in the stock market as you can get your hands on, because no matter what happens to the value of the dollar, no matter what happens to the means of exchange, you can always exchange ownership in the companies for whatever new currency props up. And so,
yeah, that's actually genius. That's actually smart. You can stock your money in stocks and you can liquidate them at times. That's actually smart.
But that didn't work out in the 19th. Communism is all about the public ownership of the means of production, and it's like the stock market has, in a way, solved that problem already. And the billionaire class really take advantage of this when we don't.
Yeah, but listen, the stock market is even planned. I mean, the stock market's entirely planned. I mean, they'll dump you a couple billion in fiat, and you'll go dump it into the stock market.
I think he's agreeing with us on this. I think he's saying that the stock market itself is like the public like ownership of the economy in a sense, right? And I think what he's saying is that like we let the billionaires plan the stock market and like rig the stock market, but the people need to start participating in it too and doing their own stock market rigging, like the Wall Street bet stuff.
That's what China does.
And the value in the companies transcends the means of production. That's what I'm saying.
In China, a stock market.
If the dollar collapses, the entire stock market is going to lose all of its value and go to zero, just like 1933.
No, it won't. Google the petrodollar. No, it won't.
Yeah,
Google
Tom, you saw what happened during the Great Depression. It was because everybody was overenthusiastic and everybody piled in the stock market, and it was a big bubble, and it blew up and put a lot of people in poverty.
Yeah, that's because Marx was so.
Yeah, and the same shit is going to happen to every single person investing in Bitcoin and NFTs.
Wait, that's not really true. That's not really true.
Yeah, the stock market and Bitcoin and NFTs are all negative sum gains.
Bitcoin is not the same as the stock market. You realize that's like another currency, right?
It's not a currency. I can't go to fucking Whole Foods and go buy fucking groceries with Bitcoin. No, you fucking can't. You have to exchange it back into dollars.
They have machines. You can. Yes, you can. What do you know what, CB? Hold on. Let's actually ask. How is a Bitcoin made? How do you mine a Bitcoin? Can you answer this for us? Let's make sure you know what you're talking about. How do you mine a Bitcoin, CB? What is a Bitcoin? What is it? What is a computer?
It doesn't matter. It's fictitious capital.
It doesn't matter. I don't know what I'm talking about, but I want to fucking talk as an expert. I don't know what I'm talking about. Shut the fuck up.
Isn't it like an algorithm?
You do not know what a Bitcoin is.
Like $1,000.
You do not even know what a Bitcoin is. What'd you say? Peace?
Isn't it like an algorithm or
yeah,
you use
like
the mining instrument
it's
to
basically
use like
problem.
a lot of electricity to mine it?
It's essentially like a math problem.
It's the dumbest form of currency ever.
Wait a second. It's more real than money. Like, it's more real than paper money. Like, at least it takes some like expenditure of electricity to like make. I mean, I feel like money is like maybe it's like probably more of a commodity than money is. Even though the value of the Bitcoin is obviously not big.
It's a fucking waste of resources to fucking mine Bitcoin.
Oh my god, dude, shut up, You're a degrowther. You're a degrowth fucking.
Of course I am.
You believe in degrowth?
Oh
okay, wait a second. Wait a second. If you're a Marxist, you can't be believe in degrowth. When Marx, one of the main points of communism is unleashing the forces of production. What does that have to do with degrowth?
Because he likes Joe Biden. You gotta remember, he likes fucking Joe Biden too.
I don't fucking like Joe Biden. I didn't fucking vote for him.
Wait a second. Do you like AOC?
You want to fuck up our economy?
Fuck no.
You want to fuck up our... Okay, so you want to degrowth. Why don't you support America's government? Because they're fucking the ones degrowthing the whole fucking planet. Why don't you support them, fucking idiot?
They don't. They don't support degrowth at all.
They're the number one.
How are you gonna...
Your fucking belief.
How are you gonna...
degrowthing the whole world.
Whoa. How are you gonna decommodify... How are you gonna decommodify and support degrowth?
There's too much shit that exists that doesn't need to exist.
Okay. I think you don't.
He's talking about
listen,
humans.
I don't think either. There's two possible things. You could be talking about humans and you're satanic, or you might be talking about like actual like material, like commodities and stuff and so on. And either way, that's either just like satanic or it's just really stupid. Like how do you decide what should and shouldn't exist?
You know, no,
that makes no sense at all.
Henry, this is going on. Henry, I haven't solved that. This is what they think. They actually think capitalism is like a system of like infinite growth. But
that's what communism is. Yeah.
That's what
communism
is.
The whole point is that capitalism is too limited and falls apart due to its contradictions. Only communism can really unleash the forces of production. That's why communist countries industrialize way more effectively than the capitalist countries did. I mean, that's why China is able to more effectively plan its economy than America is.
Yeah, even like a small example. Look how communists can manipulate labor markets. You know, Marx talks about capitalist accumulation and how there's a tendency to drive necessary labor down, right? So that's why Marx describes that, there's a constant industrial reserve army. Well, communists say, well, we can manipulate this market. We can actually provide everybody jobs and we can produce way more shit.
Yeah, and when it comes to like climate change and all that shit, I think there's a real climate crisis that's happening. But the way you deal with that is not by stopping the production of fossil fuels, not by degrowth. It's the exact opposite. It's by unleashing the forces of production, making advancements in technology, creating new infrastructure that will allow us to...
Big nuclear.
Yeah, and creating new infrastructure.
Big hydro, big nuclear.
Yeah, and also creating new infrastructure that will allow us to deal with rising sea levels and all that kind of shit. We can create infrastructure that will allow us to deal with that, and we can do that even more effectively if we have a more productive, more powerful economy, a more powerful society. Communism has never been about degrowth. It's always been about unleashing the forces of production. I mean, it's literally always been about that. I mean, communists literally lead a revolution in the forces of production. Like if you want degrowth, then just be like a feudalist or something. Go back to like I don't know, like what? That's so stupid.
Henry, what's the end goal though? I mean, is it nirvana?
I would say for communism, and this is a really important distinction to make too. A lot of communists think that there's this perfect society that we want to reach, and this is our end goal. But for communism, there is no real end goal. The whole point of communism is itself the movement of communism, of revolutionizing the forces of production. And we're not trying to reach like a specific ideal society, because that's not really possible, right? That was the idea that early socialists had before Marx. They were called utopian socialists, and they would basically create these ideal societies and then they would say socialism is like the path towards reaching this. But with Marx, he decided to take another approach. He had what you call scientific socialism. And the basis of it is that he had this insight into the nature of capitalism and capital and the contradictions of it. And by gaining that insight, he was able to, in a political way, articulate how one takes leadership of the revolution of the forces of production that are occurring because of these contradictions in capitalism. So in a way, communists are like, how do I put it? We don't have an end goal, but we are futurists in a sense, right? Because we want to lead people into the future, but we also recognize that only through leading people into the future can you actually preserve the essence of the traditions that we hold sacred and hold dear. It's only by.
Do you want to take us to the stars?
I do want to take it.
There are ecological limits. Sure.
There are ecological limits. We need the degrowth like Bernie Sanders wants. He wants to go into Venezuela, tell them they can't use petrol. Dude, you're a fucking imperialist. Shut the fuck up. They're already doing this shit. Why don't you support the American empire if you want this degrowth bullshit? I mean, what do you think Bernie says? Bernie says, look, Venezuela's a petro-authoritarian state. We gotta go destroy them. Like, go support fucking Bernie, you fucking cuck.
I don't.
You're not a communist. You are not a communist. You're a fucking Malthusian, 21st century Malthusian Bernie supporter. That's what you are.
I think his point is that if you were a Bernie supporter, you'd be more consistent because AOC and Bernie and so on actually align with your degrowth policies. I mean, he himself literally said, Bernie literally said that for ecological reasons, we need to stamp down on these powerful petrol states.
Yeah, he said, yeah. We gotta go stop Venezuela.
And it wasn't even just for political reasons. It was for ecological reasons. It's because he believes, like you believe, there are ecological limits. So, like you don't know. You say there's ecological limits, but you know there's an endless. We have the environment, we have the world, but there's an endless amount of ways we can transform it. There's an endless amount of ways we can transform the world. We don't actually know what our limits are. In the past, Malthus thought that after we reach a certain level of population, we would no longer be able to feed people. But he was wrong.
We do know our limits, though. Like literally, every single climate scientist is saying, "Hey, we should probably
every single climate." Read Lyndon LaRouche's book. Read Lyndon LaRouche's book.
If you actually wait a second, if you actually believe in climate scientists, you would realize that there's no way to stop climate change anymore. If you actually believed in them,
we've reached the threshold.
If you believe that, why not just try to adapt to it? Why not try to adapt to the changing climate? You don't know that because you don't know that climate change is the end of all humanity or that it can't be adapted to.
Dude, that's literally. You're making the same fucking Ben Shapiro argument of, we should just adapt. We should just adapt to rising sea levels. Sell your house if rising sea levels overcomes your house.
That's not what I said. I said build infrastructure.
That makes sense, though.
The future of socialism,
build infrastructure for that. Just like in the past, people built infrastructure to deal with flooding. We can build new modern infrastructure to deal with rising sea levels and other problems that exist due to climate change. That's not an individual prescription saying you should individually build infrastructure, but then we need a government that builds the proper infrastructure and industry to deal with climate change.
We're bringing on Yossarian. He wants to destroy CB. He wants to destroy him too. Hold on.
Yeah, let him have some of the fun too.
We're tagging him in. Yossarian,
dude, I can't believe I like CB's energy.
The future of socialism is post-global warming Siberian development.
Why does it have to be Siberian? I thought you guys were American patriots.
Okay, and
because the Siberian dude.
Oh, you got us, dude. You got us. You got us. Okay,
in Soviet Russia, Siberia is American too.
How the fuck can you like be patriotic for like the most imperialistic nation in this?
Okay, so I've explained. Can you hear me okay? You guys hear me okay? Can you guys hear me okay? Okay, so I've explained this a lot, and I guess I gotta explain it again. The reason why we are patriotic is because we are dialectical materialists. We see that there's a contradiction between the American empire and the American people, and the contradiction between the American empire, their globalist agenda, and the real American civilization. These globalists, like yourself, they also don't believe in patriotism and in American culture, because they want to liquidate it, just like they want to liquidate all the cultures of the world. So when we say we're American patriots, the entire point and significance of that is that we are anti-imperialist, because the American empire is itself liquidating the American culture, is itself selling our jobs away, is itself completely uprooting the American people. It's that simple. That's why we're American patriots.
All right.
I've said this so many times. All
right. Someone named Malaysian wants to ask about communism, commodity production. Go ahead, cite your whatever. Go ahead, unmute now, and make your argument.
All right, is it on?
Yup, we can hear you just fine. Go ahead.
All right, cool. So you guys are like talking about commodity production.
Wait, before you start, I'm just letting you know I gotta go. I gotta do some stuff.
All right, man. You have a good time.
Yeah, bye.
All right, ask your question. I'll probably.
Sure. So I think this may be like a few minutes back ago, but you're talking about like the gold standard, right? And how it relates.
Right, to labor.
Yeah, to labor. Right.
Are you a Marxist? Are you a Marxist?
I mean, yeah, I guess. Yeah, I mean.
You call yourself an ANCAP. I don't know if that's like a troll or like.
It's mostly a troll, but sometimes. You know. Right. So there was this one quote by you ever heard of a man named Michael Heinrich?
Yes.
Yeah, he has this quote actually about the gold standard. Let me put it up. I just remembered about it. It's pretty lengthy, but he's kind of saying that money is always going to be linked to like a particular commodity. So like he's saying how even in Marx's time that money wasn't always actually linked to a commodity. And he also was saying that even though he can no longer like wait, let me pull it up. Sorry. Can we just read this?
Listen, when I talk about a gold standard, what I'm describing is you're measuring how much dollars you have in circulation in comparison to how much gold you have. I mean, we went beyond this. We use oil to do this instead.
Yeah, I hear you.
But Rev, gold has always been the currency throughout the ages.
So yeah, this is what I'm saying. It's not when you look at America's like deficit. This is not. I don't know what Heinrich argues. I have heard of this guy, but I mean, I can't agree with him. I can't because I mean, have you heard of the Melt School of like Marxism? Have you heard of this school?
The Melt School.
Yeah.
Like who are the I've never heard of them.
Okay, have you heard of the value? Okay. There's like two.
I heard Value Farm. Yeah.
Okay. All of these schools universally agree that this standard has broken down, and these are like the peak Marxist schools. So I don't know what Heinrich is arguing here.
I mean, Heinrich is like pretty big in like the Value Farm.
Can you send me like a PDF or something? I'll read on it. But
yeah, I can send you like pictures of like what I was mainly talking about. So that's cool.
Did Henry leave? Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, Henry gone?
Yeah, Henry. Yeah, I think they dipped.
Well, let's see BB co-host.
No, hell no.
Make Danny co-host.
Rev, your DMs aren't open, so I'm just gonna reply it on your pinned. If that's fine.
Really need me to?
Yeah. That's fine. Do it. Yeah, do that.
Yeah. Just give me a sec.
Rev, make Danny co-host.
It still says Henry's here. I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, I still see Henry too. It's weird.
I think he's glitching. I think I'm gonna remove him, but I don't want him to like. I'm gonna remove him. Yeah.
Yeah, he's gone now.
Yeah, I don't know, man. Marxists do not know what's happening, and they just don't know what's happening. I mean, that's just simple as that.
Do you have that quote, Cole?
No, the quote. I put it in the Rev's pinned. It's like in the replies.
Okay. As soon as that money is always bad.
I also I wanted to add that oil is not a fossil fuel. It is abiotic and limitless. Thank you.
Epic.
Yeah, I believe that too. I don't think it's a fossil fuel. I think it just regenerates through like the core of the earth.
Yeah.
Yeah. Since we're just sort of waiting in between now, I'd like to go back to our earlier conversation about the limits of Earth. So the current sort of climate alarmism crowd got their ideological start in a book that came out back in the 70s by a guy named Paul Ehrlich called The Population Bomb, where he basically predicted that the Earth would run out of natural resources at like 4.5 billion people. And so you see the climate alarmists, they make the same kind of prediction. They come up with these stats and they say, we'll run out of this at this certain date. And then the date gets there and the prediction doesn't come true. And the reason for that is that technological achievement, technological advancement keeps clowning on their predictions, And so even with oil, our machines keep getting more efficient. Gas mileage keeps going up. And, now we have electric cars. Like, we have so many options at this point that scarcity is becoming less and less imminent, So that's just my point there. We're using the wrong parameter. We need to base scarcity based on technological achievement, not based on current present resources in the environment.
Yeah, I also want to add that actually around that time, they were predicting a oil crisis in the 1990s. And the way they did this was a guy drew a bell curve. He drew a fucking bell curve and he predicted peak oil. But we've come to realize that oil production has actually exceeded this specific bell curve.
Did you guys know, Edison had a battery-powered vehicle 100 years ago that would get 1,000 miles per charge. It was a sodium-ion battery.
Yeah, it wasn't like a new phenomenon. That was kind of the standard at the time. Even rail cars were electricity-based.
People who have these conversations out loud tend to disappear. Be careful, gents.
Yeah, thanks for joining. Is there anyone else that wants to come on? Maybe can we bring someone else on? Somebody new?
Yeah, bring on a new speaker.
All right. We got 2 people that want to come on. I'll bring on Joey. All right.
Neo Lysenko is future based.
All right, Joey, what's up? What do you want to say?
He left.
He left? No, I think he's still connecting. He's connecting.
Says he's a listener.
Oh, there he is. Hello? Joey, are you connected? All right, well, he's a speaker now, so if he wants to talk, he can talk. Is there anyone else who wants to come on?
I don't know. This is getting late, so we might have to wrap this up. I don't know. We beat everybody today. We beat them all.
How long have you guys been going? I just got on.
Hold on, let me check the recording. We got 5 hours in.
Oh, shit.
It's a good time to stop. Yeah.
Holy shit. Well, I'm gonna head out.
The guy I wanted to. What's up, Tom? Oh shit. Okay, the guy I wanted to debate, the jihadist Jamaican guy, he never showed up. So I guess I beat him again.
Oh, the terrorist guy.
Dude, they're all fucking terrorists. They're all literally all of them are terrorists, dude. They're all fucking terrorists.
He wanted to have a coalition of countries invade and destroy America.
He said that.
Yeah, he said he wanted China and Russia and a bunch of other countries to go to war with the US.
Based.
Fucking retard.
Critical support to China against American imperialism.
You're gonna die. That's what's gonna happen, dude. You want World War III? This isn't gonna end well for any of us if that happens. It's not gonna end well for the world.
Well, yeah, a shit ton of fucking workers are gonna die. But if America has to fall for the name of communism, I'm all for it.
Workers, why not just human lives in general? Why not children?
I mean, workers, the working class, women, children,
their power in the world.
Non-binaries, all that.
Non-binary, dude. You're literally in here advocating for World War III and putting some sort of guise of the victory of communism over it. You understand that would be a disaster for everyone on the planet?
Yeah.
He thinks that's based.
He said, yeah, what the fuck?
He's like, World War III based? Nuclear Holocaust based?
I mean, you guys are the ones with Russian flags, like in your shit, like pro-war against like Ukraine.
Is that like a gotcha?
What the fuck?
Of course it is.
We're anti-war, dude.
Like
Ukraine started it. The war started in 2014.
This guy likes Paul Maddock, who wrote the most shitty book on what communism is that ever fucking existed.
No, not even 2014, bro. No, hold on.
Oh, sorry.
Everyone magically forgot that Ukraine was bombarding Donbass for a week straight. Like even after Russia recognized them, they had not even
civilians.
That's even before. I'm talking about right after Russia recognized the
Russia
they continued the ceasefire violations right after the recognition. Right,
Russia kept suing for peace. They go, let's get together and talk about this, and they go, no,
right. That was the negotiations.
We're gonna keep fighting. We're gonna keep causing problems.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, Russia tried to. I mean, yeah. Russia gave them a final warning. They were like, fuck you. We're going to keep blowing up your shit. And they blew up a fucking hospital. They blew up a fucking
The day before,
one guy blew himself up.
The day before, Ukraine marched in, like they attacked the Russian border. I don't know if y'all remember that.
Yeah, they would sneak. Yeah, they try to sneak in guys. Remember that one guy? The one guy blew himself up. They try to sneak guys into the country.
No, dude, they did this shit because they thought they had the backing of NATO. They got so goddamn cocky.
Well, yeah, they did have the backing of NATO in a sense because they were sending them money and weapons. But
I thought what I meant was like they thought that NATO would invade with them.
Yeah, that's Zelensky, but he's on coke. He's an idiot.
Tell me about it.
I think these guys are going to push into World War III, and I think nukes are going to be involved in this at the end of the day. And Zelensky, he's backed in the corner because he has Nazis nipping at his heels, and his family's still in Ukraine. So I don't think he really cares about Ukraine. He has like $500 million, but he has a lot to lose, and the Nazis are just pushing him to be the front man.
Yeah, I think there's a strong argument to be made that Zelensky could be a straight up hostage right now. We don't know, but we don't know what's going on.
You think Zelensky's a hostage to the deep state?
I mean, Zelensky doesn't have as much power as you think in this whole thing.
It's just a figurehead at the end of the day, because I don't know if y'all remember, but on my old account, I made a short thread talking about the Atlantic Council when Zelensky gone. This was back in January. They're like a fucking think tank, right? Like a think tank that influences a lot of U.S. foreign policy. And they wanted Zelensky gone, and they wanted him replaced with Poroshenko, the guy before Zelensky, who's like more of a hardliner. Because remember, Zelensky got elected on a pro-peace platform, right? He got elected by like a vast majority because he was the only one that ran on a pro-peace platform.
Yeah, there are videos of that actually on Twitter too.
All right, I'm gonna end the space. I'm gonna end the space. It's getting late. I'm gonna go chill.
All right.
Hey, before you go, check out this website. It's called Rex Research.com.
What is it called?
It's called Rex Research.com.
All right, I'll check it out.
RexResearch.com.
Yeah, it sucks I got here late. I wish I got here earlier.
Yeah, I'll see you guys later.